ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਤੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. Today we're going to talk about ChithiSingpora Sikh massacre. The massacre of 35 villagers in Kashmir on eve of Bill Clinton's visit to India in March of 2000 invited widespread outrage. New York Times wrote, among the careful preparations for the historic occasion were a painstaking cleanup around the Taj Mahal, a reconnoitering for wild tigers he might glimpse on a VIP safari, and the murder of 35 Sikh villagers in a place called ChithiSingpora. March 20, 2000, middle of the night, unidentified gunmen wearing military uniforms lined up 37 Sikh villagers against the wall of the village Gurdwara before shooting them point blank. 35 were killed, with two surviving to tell the tale. 5 days later, on March 25, five innocent local Muslim youth were also picked up, labeled as foreign mercenaries, and killed by security forces. 8 protesters were killed in police firing as they protested the killing of local Muslim youth. This took the toll of innocents murdered to 48. Two independent inquiries, one under the aegis of Amnesty International, blamed Indian government for conducting the massacre of Sikhs at ChithiSingpora and the subsequent fake encounter of five Muslim youth. As per the investigations, this was done with an aim to blame Pakistan and turn international opinion in India's favor. The inquiry by Punjab Human Rights Organization was headed by a retired Lieutenant General and retired High Court Judge of India. The investigators concluded that a central agency of the Indian government directed this operation without the knowledge of the state government. We feel that the central agency directed this operation without the knowledge of the state chief minister and his cabinet. This, therefore, is an act that needs to be condemned at a high level, said the probe report. The report also said, quote, it is our considered opinion that Pakistan has nothing to gain by ordering militant mercenaries to massacre Sikhs in the Kashmir Valley. Pakistan had steered clear of this kind of act during 10 to 15 years of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, unquote, the group wrote. Quote, J&K militants too had nothing to gain from such an incident. Indian leaders, however, gained substantial mileage from this incident as a spate of international sympathy was forthcoming. Unquote. According to the report, the people in the village of ChithiSingpora did not believe that the militants had any hand in the incident. The report notes that as a rule, foreign mercenaries visit a village once and do not come back again. So these men cannot be militants. Also, real militants do not part with their weapons even for a minute. The killers wore military uniform and chanted Jai Mata Di, Jai Hind, a Hindu nationalist slogan. The finger points towards the so-called counterinsurgents, surrendered militants working under the direct control of local army units. Ludhiana-based International Human Rights Organization dispatched its own high-level investigation team comprising its chairman D.S. Gill, General Secretary, and Randhir Singh. The investigative team met 200 people, including eyewitnesses, and also blamed counter, uh, counterinsurgency forces under army for conducting the massacre. The report said, definitely, the accusing finger is towards the intelligence network and counterinsurgency forces. We are therefore left with no option but to blame them. Under the pressure from international agencies, the local authorities had to exhume the mutilated bodies of five Muslim youth whom security forces had labeled as foreign mercenaries. Relatives immediately recognized their loved ones from an odd ring or ornament on their body. We learned firsthand that the Special Task Force under SSP Anantnag picked up five civilians from different localities on March 24, 2000. On March 25, 2000, fake encounter with so-called Afghan militants was enacted at Panchthan village in Patribal. All five picked up innocents were killed, their bodies burnt and defaced. A photograph of this act published in Punjab Kesari dated March 26, 2000 is attached as the annexure to indicate the method adopted in this act. The face of the victim in the photograph was covered with a film lest it to be recognized by his kinsmen. Or by March 31, 2000, the cat was out of the bag as the residents of Anantnag proceeded in procession to the DC Anantnag's office to protest these fake killings of innocent civilians. The police resorted to firing, and eight more protesting people were killed. There were hartal and processions daily throughout the valley until the state chief minister Farooq Abdullah ordered the buried bodies of five killed at Panchalthal to be exhumed. Relatives of Zahoor Ahmad Dalal recognized his body, including his ring, sweater, and other clothing. Relatives of the other victims too authoritatively recognized the half burnt bodies and claimed them. Unquote. The reports of Indian government hand caused flutter in the US Congress. Multiple congressmen took to the floor, directly blaming India and urging the US to cut off all ties with the Indian government until it stops the use of terrorism against its own citizens. Quote, America must not allow an allegedly democratic country to continue these activities, unquote, said Congressman Adolphus Towns of New York. Quote, we must do what we can to help bring freedom to the people of South Asia. It is time to stop our aid to India until it lets the people within its borders enjoy the human rights to which all people are entitled. Unquote. Quote, tens of thousands of Sikh prisoners of conscience, men and women, are languishing in Indian jails without a charge or a fair trial. Many have been in illegal custody since 1984. Most independent observers and human rights organizations have blamed the government sponsored militant groups for the mass murder of the Sikhs in Kashmir during President Clinton's visit in March 2000. Unquote. Bill Clinton also expressed public remorse by mentioning the ChithiSingpora massacre in the foreword for a book by Madeleine Albright. He used a diplomatic word, Hindu militants, for the killers. And I quote what he wrote. Quote, during my visit to India in 2000, some Hindu militants decided to vent their outrage by murdering 38 Sikhs in cold blood. If I hadn't made the trip, the victims would probably still be alive if I hadn't made the trip. The last lines of the Barry Birak New York Times article on this massacre read, everyone knows about this crime. The Indian army did it. Okay, this was my small, single presentation with a PowerPoint on the on this on the massacre and the aftermath of it, and hopefully, people found it a bit. We'll go into the detail of each of this. I'll kind of play, the video interview, a small excerpt from the video interview of Lieutenant General K.S. Gill, who actually conducted the inquiry. Okay, so I'm going to just play that video a bit. Hopefully, you guys can hear what he actually said. So, this Lieutenant General actually was appointed, and he went and did the inquiry, and this is what he had to say.
ਕੈਪਟਨ ਤੱਕ ਨੇ ਵਈ ਪੁੱਛੀ ਇਹ ਕੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ ਰਾਤ ਨੂੰ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਪਲਾਨ ਬਣਾਈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਯੂਨੀਫਾਰਮ ਚਾੜਨਾ ਕਪੜਾ ਟੰਗਦੇ ਨੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਖੇਲਣ ਕੋਲ ਲੱਪੇ ਸੀਆਈਡੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਕੱਢ ਲਈ ਸੀ ਪਿੰਡ ਇਸ ਪਿੰਡ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਕਿਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਸੌਂਦੇ ਕਿਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਆ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਕੌਣ ਚੌਦ ਮੇਲਸ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਨੇ ਹਥਿਆਰ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਨੇ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਕੱਢ ਲਿਆ ਐਂਡ ਦੈਨ ਦੇਰ ਵਨ ਨਾਈਟ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ चेकिंग के लिए निकलाओ बाहर आओ सारे आओ मेल सारे बाहर आ जाओ वो लाइन अप कर देते थे पहले होता ही करते थे फ्रेंडली लाइन अप उन्होंने कॉन्फिडेंस देता फिर फैसला किया अद्धी एक दिन आ गए 10 बजे रात निकलो बाहर गुरुद्वारे को लाइन अप करे फिर तुम ताकि पहुंचा
तो ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਆਰਮੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਵੀ ਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ
we gave the full report we said Army was on board. Clinton kicked up a rout. Due to me, a lot of lives have been lost. I want to know exactly what happened. The other Human Rights Organization, United Nations, said. And we sent them the report. क्या हो गया? Then Americans do.
तो ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਉਸ killing ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ political reasons ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ?
No, only this. That exposed the BJP government. And BJP government wanted to tell Clinton J&K की हो रहा है पाकिस्तान ने बटला प्रोपेगेंडा करना सी ये देखो पाकिस्तान की कर रहे पाकिस्तान ने सारे सिख लाइन अप करके मार
so basically BJP planted this
to impress Clinton to help India against Pakistan ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੰਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਦ ਇਹ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਿਆ ਫਿਰ ਅਡਵਾਨੀ ਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਆਰਡਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ कि देखो जल्दी से कुछ करो जिससे कन्विंस हो जाए भाई इन्होंने किया था ये पकड़ लो किसी इन्होंने 5 इनोसेंट बंदे कश्मीरी पहाड़ के ऊपर जाके जाके मारते कि मारते वो करने वाले जेल करने वाले मारते they were innocent boys.
Yeah, this is the testimony of Lieutenant General Kartar Singh Gill, a very senior and decorated soldier of the Indian Army, who actually presided over the inquiry that was ordered by Amnesty International. Amnesty International is basically the body under United Nations. Previously it used to be called United Nations Human Rights Commission, and now later on its name was changed to Amnesty International. And so that inquiry was ordered by Amnesty International. Not only General was there was another very senior retired justice of High Court from India itself, Justice Ajit Singh, known for his human rights activism. And also there was a very, very prominent human rights a member of the civil society, Mr. Inderjeet Jeji, who had many books to his credit. The 3-member team actually did a thorough investigation with whatever resources they had, and they went around and stayed in the village there, talked to the people in the village, and then published a report. That report is available publicly. If you can Google it, and you'll find it. But I can give you, quickly rundown of what the report says. The report, when they actually interviewed the villagers were convinced that this was an act done by the Indian Army. And it was very clear to them that, these were no militants. And the reason they were convinced was that just around 1.5 months before, 2 months before, Clinton's visit was supposed to take place. Clinton was supposed to arrive there on 21st of March, 2000. 2 months before that, they said there are a group of people who were dressed as militants. They started visiting the village. And then they started playing with the kids, with cricket with them in the fields. And, they will visit and sometimes, kind of meet the elders as well, joke around with people. But the way they were acting, they were trying to show they were militants. But the villagers had figured out that they were actually not militants because their mannerisms did not match a typical militant group which crossed the villages normally. Because they were very careless. They will put their rifles on trees and kind of joke around with kids, and had showed no signs of any stress. So the villagers already knew there was something wrong going on. And then these same people, when they on the night of March 20, they formed 2 groups, and they basically approached the village from two sides. So and then they were in the military fatigues, and they claimed that they were doing just search and cordon and checking if everybody is there. But from the people who were part of that group, the many village women actually recognized that many people who were part of that group, the killer group that came in the night, were also the same people who were visiting the village as disguised as militants. And then they took around 37 Sikh men, lined them across the Gurdwara wall, and then shot them point blank, out of which 35 died and two survived. And then this was nobody in Kashmir believed this was done by militants, including the villagers themselves. And then on 25th of March, the Indian government, under pressure, on the orders of the Home Minister L.K. Advani, as per the Lieutenant General Gill, the Home Minister under pressure, Clinton kicked up a row, saying that, hey, this happened because of me, and the truth has to be found out. And then on under that pressure, the Home Minister, in that kind of pressure, ordered down the chain that do something to kind of make sure Clinton is reassured that we have killed the killer. So what these people did, they actually, rather than telling the truth, they caught five innocent Muslim villagers and murdered them under cold blood, and then announced to the whole world that these were the people who had conducted the massacre and were the foreign mercenaries. Now that created a huge storm in the valley, because the youth, the villagers who were abducted, their family members started saying that there is something wrong. And under that pressure, on 31st March, the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Farooq Abdullah, ordered that the bodies of those militants, which the Indian government is claiming that they are militants, those bodies should be exhumed and seen if they are foreign mercenaries or they are local youth. And when the bodies were exhumed very publicly, immediately many villagers identified them as their relatives, from the stuff that was on their bodies. So it became clear these were no foreign mercenaries coming from Pakistan. These were just ordinary villagers. And as part of this whole thing, when villagers were protesting, asking for the bodies to be exhumed, the army also fired on a procession in which 8 more people were killed. So in total, in this whole span of 2 weeks, 48 innocents were murdered by the Indian state in cold blood, all with the aim of creating a false flag operation and use it as a political brownie or diplomatic point with the president of United States. So I just played the interview by General Gale, but what we'll talk about is, like, this has become in prominence lately because a couple of days back, the convener of Sikhs for Justice, or he basically calls himself the Council General. Sikhs for Justice is a human rights organization based out of US, run by a gentleman named Mr. Sardar Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, and has been in limelight because the Indian government had been calling it a terrorist organization. But he claimed that there is a whistleblower Indian Army officer who was actually part of this entire operation, who has escaped to United States, and has met Panu personally many times, and has given a whole testimony and kind of corroborated that this is exactly what happened. Now, this is new. While there were already reports and no people knew this was the Indian government who did it, now we have new evidence which actually is of a different level. Now, if true, now there's no way I can corroborate that the person that Mr. Pannu met is a genuine army officer, but he has put it out there, the video interview. Now I think it is up to the media. It is up to Washington Times, New York Times, Washington Post, sorry, New York Times, these kind of newspapers to do their job and kind of figure out if this story is true. And so let me play that video of that army officer, Rathod, who met Mr. Pannu, and then kind of explained to him that how he was involved and what all was done on that day in ChithiSingpora. So let me just quickly play that video as well. Okay. Uh,
25th year of ChithiSingpora Sikh massacre. Sikh men were lined up against Gurdwaras and shot at point blank range under the first ever BJP government led by Prime Minister Vajpayee. Exactly a day before, US President Bill Clinton was arriving in India. And while Clinton was still in India, 5 local men were killed and falsely shown as Pakistani-based terrorists. But in 2006, the CBI admitted that these were innocent locals who were picked up and killed to cover up an Indian covert operation against the Sikh people of Kashmir. 25 years later, the truth has finally come out. An Indian army captain, Rathore, after years in hiding and on the run, finally reached the US. He met me in person several times in my this very office in New York and gave chilling details. He was leading one of the 2 groups of firing squad that ruthlessly killed Sikhs in ChithiSingpora. Rathore has been haunted by the Indian government since then. I was told by Captain Rathore that the BJP government is still out to kill him, as he is the sole survivor of the firing squad that carried out the broad daylight killing of Sikhs at ChithiSingpora.
मैं कैप्टन राठौर मैं वक्त ये बात 20 मार्च 2000 की है जब हमें छत्तीसगढ़ में सिखों को मारने के हुक्म मिले थे। मैं उन 2 फायरिंग स्क्वाड में से एक को लीड कर रहा था। भारतीय सेना का एक गुप्त अभियान था जो ब्रिगेडियर जेएस की कमान के नीचे चल रहा था।
The Sikh killings happened just before US President Bill Clinton's visit to India, the first by an American president in 2 decades. The timing was significant, as India, under its first BJP Hindutva government, had become nuclear, and Pakistan had responded as well.
हमें सिखों को मारने के आदेश मिले थे। सिखों की हत्या इस तरह करनी थी कि ये लगे कि ये हत्या किसी पाकिस्तानी ट्रेंड कश्मीरी आतंकवादियों की तरफ से हमला किया गया।
Sikhs were targeted to get the attention of Bill Clinton. Captain Rathore was part of the Rashtriya Rifles, an elite counter-insurgency unit operating in Kashmir. Captain explains how the operation was carried out.
उस समय मैं मुजफ्फराबाद में तैनात था जब ब्रिगेडियर जीएस ने मुझे एक इमरजेंसी मिशन के लिए वापस बुलाया था। हमें कहा गया कि हम गांव छत्तीसगढ़ के लोगों को अच्छी तरह से समझें, वहां के लोगों का विश्वास जीतें और खुद को कश्मीरी मुजाहिदीन बताएं। हम गांव में जाने लगे, गांव के लोगों का भरोसा जीतने लगे। हमने अपनी 2 टीमें बना ली, फिर हमने एक नकली मुठभेड़ भी की, एक दूसरे पर गोलियां चलाई। फिर जब हम छत्तीसगढ़ में शरण लेने पहुंचे तो गांव के लोगों को इस बात का यकीन हो गया कि हम वाकई में मुजाहिदीन हैं। कई दफा हम गांव के लड़कों के साथ क्रिकेट खेलने जाते, उनके साथ समय व्यतीत करते और उनको इस बात का यकीन करवाया कि हम वाकई में कश्मीरी मुजाहिदीन हैं।
During President Clinton's visit, the BJP government wanted to show that Pakistan, which had maintained a close relationship with America since the 1980s, was sponsoring terrorism.
अंतिम आदेश 13 मार्च को मिले, जिसमें हमें 20 मार्च को ऑपरेशन छत्तीसगढ़ को अंजाम देना था। इसमें साफ निर्देश थे कि गांव के सभी सिखों को मारना है।
For years, the killings were attributed to Lashkar-e-Taiba, a Pakistani terrorist group. But Captain Rathore confirms that the ChithiSingpora Sikh massacre was planned at the Rashtriya Rifle headquarters and executed under the command of Brigadier J.S.
20 मार्च की शाम को हमने गांव के सभी सिखों को एक दीवार के साथ खड़ा किया। ये बोला कि हमें इनकी शनाख्त करनी है और फिर पीछे से हमने गोलियां मारनी शुरू कर दी और इन सिखों को मार डाला। हमें ये बोला गया कोई भी सिख जिंदा नहीं बचना चाहिए। हमने एक बार फिर से गोलीबारी की और हमने ये निश्चित किया कि कोई भी सिख जिंदा ना बचे। जाने से ठीक पहले हमने जय हिंद के नारे लगाए।
I was told by Captain Rathore that over the years, all other members of the firing squad have been eliminated by the Indian government one by one.
ऑपरेशन छत्तीसिंगपुरा के बाद मेरी टीम के सभी साथियों को एक एक कर भारतीय सरकार ने खत्म कर दिया ताकि सारे सबूत मिटाए जा सके।
The ChithiSingpora massacre of Sikhs was more than an act of violence. It was an orchestrated event with the BJP government's geopolitical agenda to garner support against Pakistan. For the first time, an Indian army officer, Captain Rathore, who led the firing squad, has confessed and given a detailed account. But the question today remains, who will be held accountable?
अमेरिका आने से पहले मैंने अपनी जान बचाने के लिए पहले यूरोप में शरण ली, लेकिन वहां भी भारतीय एजेंसियों ने मेरा पता लगा लिया था।
Finally, the truth about ChithiSingpora is out in the open. The massacre of Sikhs was planned by none other than Modi's NSA Ajit Doval, who was placed in J&K in the 1990s. Doval was instrumental in the release of 1999 hijacked plane passengers in exchange for Masood Azhar, whom he personally brought from Kashmir. Doval ran covert operations from Udhampur, the headquarters of Rashtriya Rifles, and the hub of intelligence bureau activities. Justice, as we say, has no expiry date. And when Sikhs liberate Punjab from the Indian occupation, they will hold Ajit Doval and all those responsible accountable. Today, the entrance of ChithiSingpora village has a board which says, "Jyotyon prem khelan ka chao, sirtar tali gali moriao, itmarg pair tarije, sir dije, kaan na kije."
शहीद का जो खून है वो कौम की ज़कात है, शहीद की जो मौत है वो कौम की हयात है। मुअर्रिखा 20 मार्च 2000 को शाम 7:50 बजे गांव छत्तीसिंगपुरा में नामालूम गुनागार दहशतगर्दों ने गुरुद्वारा सिंह सभा समंदरी हाल के सहन की दीवार और गुरुद्वारा शौकीन महल्ला के सहन की दीवार के साथ खड़ा करके 35 बेगुनाह सिखों को धोखे के साथ अंधाधुंध गोलियों से सदा की नींद सुलाकर शहीद कर डाला। ये दर्दनाक सानिहा जब तक चांद सितारे हैं तब तक फर्श और अर्श से गुनाहगारों को लानत और अजीम शहीदों को रहमत बरसाता रहेगा। और हर साल 21 मार्च को तमाम गांव की बरादरी इस शहादत को जल जलाल से मनाती रहेगी।
Okay, so this is that video that came from Mr. Panu, and I'll show you guys a bit of the UN report that was published, and I have that here with me, and we can read some more relevant aspects of that if we have time. There was also an article that was published in Baz News, jointly written by me and Jasveer. You guys can read that. It has all the evidence. We highlighted, what the UN report said, the two different reports, what they talked about. And this is the Amnesty International report. I'll share that on my screen as well. Yeah, with that, let's take some speakers. If anybody wants to take a speaker and ask some questions about this. Happy to take it, and we'll keep it short and sweet today. The idea was just to share the facts about ChithiSingpora massacre because not many people know about it. So, if anybody has any questions to ask based on what we saw, you can come on the speaker um, while I keep walking people through the Coin. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Just a really quick question. That detail by that army gentleman was quite detailed, but it was in Hindi. Would you mind summarizing what he said for those that couldn't understand him? Because it was really interesting, like where he was initially kind of stationed, what reasoning they were told to go to Kashmir, how they used tactics to gain, confidence. That was interesting because they basically created red flag incidences using two teams to assure people that they are some sort of militants. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, just to give people a background, what he said was that there is a local army unit there. It's called Rashtriya Rifles. So Rashtriya Rifles is a counter-insurgency units of the Indian Army. So they are generally deployed in areas where you have insurgency operations or militancy from the local population against the Indian state. Typically, Kashmir, Northeast are the regions where generally these Rashtriya Rifle units are deployed. Generally, they are not deployed typically Northeast for some reason. They are primarily focused on Kashmir. But the way these Rashtriya Rifle units are formed is that different officers and men from different units are taken on volunteer basis for a period, or they are loaned for a period of 2 to 4 years, and then they come and serve in these units. So generally, these units are almost like mercenary units. They don't have the Indian Army. If you are familiar with it, it is basically an army where units are formed based upon caste and clan. And so here you have the Sikh regiment, sometimes the religion. Sikh regiment, you have the Jats, the Rajputs, and these have all these regiments have very glorious and deep history, and they typically come from one typical ethnic community, and they bind together, and they have their own traditions and honor to maintain. But Rashtriya Rifles is a very different mix regiment, and also formed of kind of, you can claim them they are temporary soldiers there, and generally not seen in very high light. But like many officers go there to make their careers. They can go and like they'll show I killed like 10 militants and I killed 15 militants, and and that is being rewarded a lot now in the Indian Army. So that is where the unit that he claims he was posted in, a Rashtriya Rifle unit, which was very close to the village. And then there is some brigadier there, Brigadier JS, who ordered this. And what he's claiming is exactly what is in the inquiry report by the UN as well. So the way this massacre was conducted was that some of the army Jawans, they disguised themselves as militants and started visiting this village almost 2 months earlier, before the Clinton visit. And they will visit the village and they will play cricket with the village boys, and basically claim that they are militants who will be here in this area for some time, and then they'll go off. This is not very abnormal. This happens in the valley. But then the villagers were already smelling that something is afoul, because these people were not behaving like a typical militant. These were, so for example, these guys will come, and while kind of being in the village, they'll put their firearms on the trees. Okay, they'll hang them on the branch of a tree and then play cricket. And which militant does that? Militants are always under threat, of being attacked. So they never let their firearm go even for 1 second. But these guys were behaving odd, so the villagers already knew that these are not ordinary militants. And then through that mechanism, these guys had earned the entire trust, and like understood how many men are there in the village, what how many kids are there, etc., etc., because their plan was to kill every single male member of the village. And then on the night they conducted the operation, what the UN report lays out the sequence of events is exactly what this officer is also claiming, that they were divided. They came as two groups. So the village is kind of on both sides of the road. A road kind of goes from the middle of the village. So one group came from the north, the other from the south, and that way nobody could escape. And then they entered, kind of covered the entire village or cordoned off the entire village. And then he said that we started taking the men out of the houses, and this was happening around 8 to 8:30 p.m. on March 20th, just hours before Clinton's plane was to land in New Delhi. And then they took the villagers out, the men out, not the kids and the woman, and asked the woman to stay inside, claiming that they were just doing an identification parade, which is typically done by the Indian Army to check if any militants are hiding in the vicinity, and that they're just going to do identification check. And under that excuse, they took these 37 men and lined them up against the wall of the Gurdwara, which is the Sikh temple there. And then once they were lined up, there was a colonel who was kind of running this operation, a commanding officer, not colonel. The inquiry says commanding officer, and then the inquiry also says that the commanding officer was actually drunk. Not just drunk, he was drinking from an open bottle of whiskey all the time. And then he basically, and if you are a Muslim militant, you can know, right? You can make out. I have never seen a Muslim militant being drunk or drinking. Okay, it's a strict no. Anyways, so that officer, the commanding officer, they were calling him CO. As per the inquiry report, he basically then ordered for the fire to be opened on these men, and all of them were obviously killed, while the woman watched them, from their men getting killed right in front of their eyes. The kids were watching, and the some of the women claimed that they were able to recognize the voices and even the faces of some of these killers, because these were the same guys who were coming to their village for almost 2 months. And the same thing is actually now being corroborated by this army officer Rathod, who is saying, yes, we started going there as militants earlier to kind of understand the village, and later on we did that operation on that night of 20th of March 2000. So the one new piece of information that he has added a coin from my perspective, over and above what was there in the UN report, was that he has claimed that he is the only one left survivor from that operation, that all his army associates who were involved, the Indian government actually eliminated them one by one. And um, and then he was the only one left, and that he escaped to Europe. And then from Europe also they figured out that he lives in Europe, and they were after him. And then he escaped to United States, and here he is, and he is kind of giving the testimony. And I'm kind of I hope, like, if you guys, I urge everybody to retweet this space. This has been in English. I think it is a huge story. I think Washington Post should do a story. New York Times did do a story at that point in time. That article was very famous, called the Kashmir Mystery, and it basically, this is a huge story now, especially with this guy being around who has served in the army. I'm pretty sure Pannu will be more than happy to make introductions, and if you guys are willing to publish this story, it'll be a story which will be of international ramifications, and hopefully some journalist worth his salt will do his job. And also you guys can help by retweeting this. If you know some journalist friends, if you know people in media, mainstream media, please go ahead and share it. This will at least the when states indulge in terrorism against their own citizens, we as citizens, all we can do is tell the truth to the world, and tell the real face of that state. So you can do the right thing by sharing this further. And if you know some people in media, please propagate. So Coin, did I answer your question, or what else did stand out? Sorry, I went on a monologue. But we can start a conversation a bit of a, what else stood out. If we probably need more speakers as well.
That's exactly what I wanted. Thank you.
Yeah, Dwight Singh Shruti, how do they pronounce his name? Shirute Farms, Shirute, like Shirat, Shirut. Sounds very Sanskritish. Not sure if that is a complimentary thing nowadays. It seems like nobody likes to be associated with anything coming from India or anything remotely Indian. It's just
So, what was the outcome of the amnesty report?
the amnesty report. Yeah, it's kind of, I'm displaying it. Once they publish this report, look, the fact is that there's actually a very shameful statement made by the minister in the government, the Indian government, that point in time. He basically said, standing in the floor of the parliament, okay, Pramod Mahajan was his name. He is no longer on this earth. He basically said, even if, even if this was done, by our boys, India will never say sorry for it. That was his statement. That is just India will never apologize for it. And something on those lines. And I think that statement is actually here. Or he said we will say sorry, but we will not punish. Okay, this is what he said. Pramod Mahajan. Sorry, I misquoted him. So he basically said on April 14th, we would only say sorry if the security forces are indicted in many of such killings. Security forces would not be punished for the killings of civilians. It would demoralize the troops who are fighting insurgency in different states. Okay, so it's just so there was nothing like what can you do? Coin the Indian state is supposedly a biggest democracy in the whole world, in the front of the world, and that's where I say like the West has been shooting itself in the foot. And the chicken will come home to roost one day, and they've already come home to roost in Canada, in UK, and now they are waiting to be roost in coming home to roost in America, and it's probably too late right now for America to do anything. Look, all kind of I was just reading, you will see all kind of action being taken. Nobody will be able to touch the H1Bs or the Indian diaspora. You can see it even right now. It'll all be noise, Twitter, this, that, but real action, nothing will happen because the Indians have so much influence. Yeah, I can read certain portions from that. Okay. Uh, this is paragraph 2.3. This is around 7:30 p.m. Actually, not 8 p.m. It was 7:30 p.m. The killers were clad in uniforms worn by our armed forces. This is I'm just reporting directly from the report. Uniforms were smeared with holy and Indian festival colors. Half a bottle of liquor was found at site, which villagers felt indicted killers had consumed drinks prior to crime. In fact, some had seen the commanding officer take a swig from a liquor bottle. After the killings, the slogan Jai Mata Di Jai Hind was shouted by the killers before they left. Um, Villagers confirmed that Muslim families were most concerned and have consoled the death of the Sikh family members. Um, where is it? The villagers described the crime in detail. The killers were led by a tall man who the others addressed as CEO. The killers were in two groups and rounded up male members present at and living around the two gurdwaras of the village. The Nambardar, headman, and Havaldar, ex serviceman Jagir Singh, were especially called out of their residence and informed that a crackdown was to take place. All were required to come to the Gurdwara. As the men came out of their homes, they were made to sit on the ground next to the wall of the first Gurdwara and the opposite wall of the smaller Gurdwara. Thus, 17 and 18 men, respectively, were lined up and killed by point blank firing. The bullet marks were clearly visible on both walls. The incidents of Karamjit Singh, alias Kuku, was narrated. He had collected milk from the Muslim sector and on return was stopped by the CEO and made to sit down. He got restless and told the CEO that he must deliver the milk for his sick son immediately and promised to return. CEO said, आप बैठो थोड़ा देरी हमको खाली खाना पूर्ति करनी है. Suspecting foul play, which he voiced to his neighbor Nanak Singh, he slipped away and reached home. There are a couple of people who escaped, and so it is their story. And there are other things. I'll read some couple of other important pieces from the report. Okay. So there's the testimony of Sardar Naranjan Singh, who was a teacher. So he had the following to say. President Bill Clinton's visit was confirmed about 2 months before he visited India. Soon after this, so-called militants started visiting village ChithiSingpora. They were dressed in shirts, trousers under a firan, wore rubber boots and cap, mixed with Sikhs freely, spoke Pahadi language, said they were residents of Lahore and Faisalabad, had weapons which they hung on trees very carelessly, played cricket with boys. They told one lady, "We have come from Lahore and were given rupees 1 lakh by Pakistan government and also promised rupees 1 lakh more for each killing in J&K." On day of carnage, CEO of the killer group was seen drinking liquor from half bottle by a by a lady belonging to Jagir Singh's family just before the killings. She saw this from her house through the glass planes as it is located next to the Gurdwara. They used to buy kulchas from Muslims and take them with tea from Sikhs. They also challenged Sikh youth to a one-day cricket match which was turned down by the Sikh elders. They would carelessly hang their weapons on trees and appear to fear no threat from the security forces. My uncle, Sardar Kashinder Singh, BDO, resident of my village, knew a Jawan of the Rashtriya Rifle Unit located at Sale and used to visit him. 20 days before the carnage, on his visit, he was told by the Jawan, "Militants visit Chitti Singhpura too often. I hope Sikh Bhais do not get killed someday." This RR unit was then deployed in the village after the March 2000 incident. Again, my uncle visited Chitti Singhpura. The RR Jawan told him, "See, I told you this would happen." When asked if these visitors to Chitti Singhpura before carnage were foreign mercenaries, he replied, "As a rule, foreign mercenaries normally visit a village once and do not come back. So these men cannot be militants. Also, real militants do not part with their weapons even for a minute." Uh, I'll just read this last one and then come to you, Coin. Wife of Havaldar Nanak Singh of Chitti Singhpura has recognized the killers as same people who used to come often. She saw and recognized one of these men on day of the carnage when he came to her house and dragged her son away in spite of her appeals. Okay. Anyways, yeah, Coin, go ahead. Coin, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just a quick question. So this rifles unit, they could speak the local language. Why do you suppose that is? And as there was a reference to rural, and I'm assuming rural agency, rural or the internal Indian one, so would the Prime Minister have ordered this?
Not sure if the Prime Minister could have ordered this. Ideally, yeah, Prime Minister should have been in the know for sure. Because the raw, you are
Who
right.
was the Prime Minister at that time? Sorry.
Yeah, Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. The BJP was in power. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. The order could have come. We are told at least Lieutenant General Kuljit Singh Gill, who did the inquiry, he names Advani, who was the home minister. So, depending upon what kind of arrangement the prime minister wants to have, he could have asked the NSA to be the main person instructing the RAW, and the NSA to be mainly working with the home minister. So, as per Kuldeep Singh Gill, at least the second order, that hey, catch some people, do something so that we can placate Bill Clinton. And on those orders, those five Muslims, innocent Muslims who were picked up and killed, that order came directly from Advani. That Kuldeep Singh Gill confirms. But he, in his report, he says that the main order to kill those 35 Sikh, that came directly from a central agency, which could be IB or RAW. There are two agencies in central government of India, IB and RAW. In my assessment and my reading, IB is the more powerful one, and RAW is for external intelligence, and IB is for the internal intelligence. And the IB is the one which indulges in all kind of dirty thing, more than RAW, I would say. RAW also does the same thing, and I believe probably it was IB which was working on this, creating this kind of a facade, and at least in the report says that the state chief minister had no knowledge, so they kind of give a clean chit to Farooq Abdullah in that matter. But imagine what kind of state is this? like, like you can, officially order murders, okay? Officially, like the people, sitting there order like mass murders, not just one odd aberration. It's just it's kind of routine for them, okay? It's kind of par for the
I was
course.
about to say, it sounds like it's a very
Yeah,
used formula.
yeah.
And you could probably think of lots of cases where they've used so-called apprehension of terrorists, and innocent people have been killed, to either make a statement internationally or to make laws stronger within India.
It happened recently, Coin, to send a message that look, India is very strictly, cracking down on organized crime, especially the Sikhs are indulging in a lot of crime and gangsters. What they did was they picked up these three very youth from a very poor background in Punjab. If you remember, this is 1 month back. They took them to a small, village in Uttarakhand, and they just murdered them in cold blood, and then claimed that these guys are, some kind of militants, Khalistani militants who were also involved in drug trade and all that kind of bullcrap. And we know exactly these guys, three boys were taken. Which hotel they were made to stay? They were basically the police. The police is taking them. Okay, police made them stay in this hotel, and in the morning they come in like proper, like they called the local police officer from the Uttarakhand police, that come, we have a job to do. Okay, as if it is just a normal job for them to go and kill people. And the local police wala, he and these guys are Punjab police. Okay, they are staying in a hotel along with the three youth. The three young people have no idea what is coming to on their head. And in the morning 4 a.m., okay, they give a call, and this local SP arrives there. He has no clue what he's been called for, and he's briefed on the spot that, oh, we have this small job to do, we have to just murder these people. And he's like, okay, fine, what do you want me to do? They take him to a nearby village where there is a small kind of a rivulet flowing and bridge, and they say this is a perfect spot to kind of claim that these guys were coming on a bike, and then they were stopped and killed. Okay, and then they have those three youth, till now they have no clue what's going on. Okay, those three youth are told to ride their bike till that spot. Those poor youth have come there on their bike, and as they're standing, they just turn around and just point blank murder them. And then the whole of India, including their prime minister, including their home minister, goes on this lying spree. These were these dreaded Khalistani militants whom we have killed. And these were youth from very poor backgrounds. Like you can say, like in Punjab, luckily we don't have that much poverty as in the rest of India. but even in these were the lowest category of or the most poor people of Punjab. And they were obviously having financial issues and whatnot. They might have been involved in some small crime, and would have been beholden to the police due to that. And that's how brutal the Indian regime is. Like, there is no care for human life here. Okay. And this is just a matter of couple of days. So that's when when people in West don't sometimes realize, like, we are living in heaven here compared to what is actually going around in the world. The whole world is, especially in India. Mr. Sanatan is here. Marshall is not going to take the mic today. But let me, yeah. Anything else, Coin? Otherwise, we'll stop. We'll close. I just want to make sure that people have this. This is out there in the public sphere. The any other topic you want to discuss?
Yeah, just the reference of Dorball as well. How is he linked to that?
Yeah, that's a good one. So the reference to Doval is actually being made by. That's a good point. You are really catching your coin. You catch stuff which I sometimes ignore. And yeah, I think Mr. Pannu actually makes a reference to Doval. Okay, and Doval at that point in time would have been in the government. And what was his role will be interesting. Let me just wiki it right now. Okay, to just what was this Mr. Ajit Dawal doing in that time period? Ajit Dawal. Let's see. Let's look at Wiki. What was he doing in that time period? Okay. So he was the director of IB from 2004 to 2005. Okay. Before that, what was he doing? Okay. When did he retire? Oh, he retired in 2005. So he was in IB. He was serving. Wow. He was in IB. Okay. And he became National Security Advisor again in 2014. But what was he doing in? Okay, so he was in IB and must have been like in a very senior role in IB. I think he became director only in 2004, so he was probably just one rung below the head position of IB. And so IB is the most, as I said, the most dirtiest intelligence agency probably anywhere in the whole world. Yeah. So this Doval's hand is kind of in many places. Okay. And ironically, I think his own son is a US citizen. Investment banker and US
He
citizen.
has a think tank, doesn't he, as well, his son?
Yeah, Vivekanand Foundation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm told is behind is the think tank that is behind all this Hindu Rashtra, and basically the think tank behind all the dirty tricks department, as well as maybe the IT cell that they're running. And did you guys notice?
Shankar's son also has a think tank. That's the one that Stephen Harper went to recently.
Oh, really? Wow.
Of ORF.
Oh, wow. Jay Shankar. Okay. Amandeep Paji is here. Let's call him. It's been many days we have listened to him. Hanji Maharaja ji and M Singh ji, welcome. Waheguru ji ki fateh.
Thanks for bringing up this space. From your Twitter handle, actually, I came to know about this massacre. First of all, thanks for what you do. Second, the question is, how do we get the government accountable for this now? As we know that this is a problem, but they haven't even said a sorry for this. So
what efforts should we make to get them to accountability stage?
Yeah, good question. I think the fact is, before I go, Amandeep Paji is here. Amandeep Paji, why ji Khalsa, why ji Fateh? ਸਿੰਘੋ ਕੀ ਹਾਲ ਚਾਲ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਸਿੰਘੋ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੋਈ ਨਵਾਂ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਕੱਢਿਆ ਪੰਨੂ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਲਾਈਮਲਾਈਟ ਚ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਤੇ we were talking about it, and not sure how much you have heard about it. Did you I know all Sikhs know about it, but were you able to kind of form an opinion on what might have happened?
Hanji, are you addressing me, Bhai?
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਭਾਜੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਤਾਂ ਕੁਝ
Hanji, I did get a basic look at it, and it looks like, he's bringing to light the episode, the entire phenomena of just targeting Sikhs for the using them as fodder for basic discourse, basic propaganda. And I think it's great that it's getting highlighted, and it's shifting the discourse away from this sort of tactical, inane conversations around whether it's personality problem based on Trudeau or some other politician in the West that's causing some ruckus. And so this is really, it's good that it's an entire case study being brought out in front of the Western audience to showcase that, look, this is the inner, hydraulics of violence, right? This is how India operates. This is how it positions Sikhs. And I think the key takeaway is that there's no, transgressive act required. There's no need for a transgressive act, any sort of a rebellion, any sort of violation of the norm, of the law. You could, is that you or
is it okay now?
There's some sounds. Yeah. Right. The main, I think the takeaway that I see it is that we should really highlight is that we are operating in a system or in a regime of violence, Brahmanical violence, that doesn't wait for any transgression, right? There's no need, there's no performance of transgression that's required for you to bear the brunt of the state. You could be just living a normal life of an Indian subject, like these Sikhs were in Kashmir, minding your own business, not being involved in any rebellious struggle or any meaningful way they're rebelling against the state. And you could face slaughter, systemic, organized, targeted violence.
Aman Paji, what would you call a category of victims? Like, there are victims of, let's say, there's a term that you sometimes use, collateral damage, right? So collateral damage is people who were not intended to be killed, but because you were in a fight and it's kind of, you have to take collateral damage of the innocents. And then there is, persecution, like you go and kind of deliberately kill people to kind of make sure they kind of adhere to what you want them to do. But what do you call this category of victims? Like, India has a huge list of thousands of victims, including Hindus. All the people killed in Air India 182 bombing, 80% were Hindus who are killed purely for creating a false flag operation, like creating like a very, very useless like diplomatic point. Like, what is this kind of loss of life? Maybe we need a term for this category of victim, or maybe there is one which I am not aware of.
I would argue that it's collateral damage still has some political logic to it.
It has a positive element to it, right? That you were trying to do something positive. Yeah.
And that is there. That's definitely there. But I think what's unique and what's under scrutinized in the context of India is that there is ritualistic violence that has no utility, right? That's beyond utilitarian, political rationale. So, for example, the entire, you can say the episode from 47 up until 84, the targeting of the most sacred spaces the most sacred aspects of a tradition. You know, your gurdwara, your families, Sikh women, symbols of the sacred Guru Granth Sahib, you know, the Bayadbi, and also the sacred spaces, you know, Gurdwara themselves. Well, they were targeted for what purpose? It defeats liberal capitalist logic, you know, a state that's trying to build itself, that's trying to organize and consolidate power, for it to go out of its way to humiliate and degrade the most enterprising, entrepreneurial part of its population, the Sikhs, right? So what's the logic behind it, right? It's not merely a political calculation or collateral damage. It's much deeper, right? And it's connected to the entire communities, the Hindu, you know, civil society's perception of itself and its perception of what is pleasure, what, you know, what brings life to the community. And, I mean, it's a deeper discussion, but I think,
Yeah.
you know, there's really the uniqueness of this situation is that one, that it's non-contingent violence. You don't have to transgress the Brahmanical state, and the system will come down upon you ritualistically. And second, it's unending. Like there's no, because there's no beginning, there's no transgressive act that begins this.
Yeah.
There's no limit to there's no end. It
Yeah.
doesn't stop.
But what all that is fine, right? That's a deeper point. What I'm trying to get to is like just a mere label. We have to have some way to. So there are victims like Sikhs in general, you know, have faced this violence. It is senseless. That's fine. But there is this very specific category of victims. I'm trying to label them within that larger category. There is this category, okay, that comes as part of that violence, where the Indian state, like in this particular incident, it wanted to create create a wave of sympathy for itself, and it wanted to delegitimize Pakistan, and wanted to tell Clinton that look, we are the victims, and you know, look, Pakistan is doing X, Y, Z. And same thing they did with Air India 1 and 2. It wanted to delegitimize the Sikhs and kind of the Sikh movement for Khalistan, and kind of, you know, claim that, oh, we are the victim, we are the guys who are doing the violence. And this and the Indian state has done that many times, like these false flag operations, like Pulwama, killing their own soldiers, to basically then create an excuse to launch attacks on some kind of fake attacks on Pakistan to win an election. So there are these short-term kind of gains that are in their mind, right? And in those for the short-term gains, they go sometimes and kill these people, not with an aim to kind of either suppress their will, or not with an aim to kind of but it's mostly the aim is very short-term, like some political aim. It's a false flag operation. Is there a term for this kind of category of victims? That's what I'm trying to, or we should actually coin some term, because India, the category of victims that India has, this is a one big category, subcategory within that larger category.
I think the closest term, right, that does justice to this internal logic of violence without consequence, right? That's the one thing that's there in all of these cases, right? Whether it's Dalits, or tribals, or lower castes that are getting slaughtered without consequence. The only entity that you can do this to, whether you can do violence without consequence, is the slave. So the slave is the only position, in the society or outside of the society that doesn't have, that it's okay to be ritualistic in your violence, be open to sort of utilizing their bodies, or their spaces, or their very being, really, for your purpose, degrade them, and have no consequences to face. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but I think the master-slave relation is what really characterizes it.
But even in a master-slave relationship, Aman Paji, like, when do we see like a master beating up his slave to show himself as a victim? Right. So what is happening in this incident is the party that has power is kind of killing the slave not with the name of teaching the slave a lesson. Basically, they are killing just for some, to claim that I am the victim. Like the India is killing people here to claim that India is the victim. Is there a deep psychological need for the Hindu mind to always be the victim? Because the amount of false flag operations that they conduct, is it a reflection of like the shame that they feel, or 1000 years of whatever, being living under Brahmanical dominance and then Muslim domination? Is it that shame, like they can never gain the confidence, like they have to be victims, and they always, like, I was reading this book, okay, yesterday we were doing the space on partition, and there is this book, and I want to show that book again. Every Sikh has to read it. I know Marshall has it. If you want to understand what happened in partition, this book is a must read. I have probably read it like 3 or 4 times now, and every time I learn something new. It's written by Sir Federal Moon. He was the DC number, sir, as was the revenue minister for Bahawalpur. Spent half his life in Punjab. He was the one who also was the one who was, when the British records of transfer of power were made public, he was the guy who was instructed by the government to compile those. There are 12 volumes, and he wrote a book. It is called Divide and Quit. Okay, and in that he analyzes all the three communities. Okay, Muslims, Sikhs, and Punjabis, Hindus. And then in this book has example after example of Hindus basically doing false flag operations. They will burning their own house and claiming Muslims did it, and doing some act and then putting it on the other side, and always putting them yourself in this fake victim position. There's something in their mind which is to appear as a victim, and when they get state power, they use that power ferociously to prove that they are the victim. And if that means even killing their own Hindus, they use it. And Marshall has his hand raised. Let's take his point. Marshall, go ahead, please.
A word occurred to me. I'm not near my internet, so I can't look it up. But chattel slavery, maybe. Like the slave one was good, but it even doesn't quite encapsulate what the Brahmins do to everybody in India. And I think chattel slavery is even a more barbaric term of slavery, where people are pretty much livestock, right? So I was thinking maybe chattel might fit there, but I can't double check. As the word maybe that would best describe what happens with the Brahmins in relation to other people.
Chattel slavery.
I think that, just as an add-on, I think there's, the reason why slave is such a great conceptual framework for this sort of violence is that you don't need to have a congruent experience to a chattel slave, right? You don't need, not every slave in history, not every slave society had slaves in chains. The true definition of slavery, right, of a slave, is the person that is open to gratuitous violence, ritualistic violence, and whose relations are not acknowledged by society. So you have, slaves in Ming Dynasty China that were bureaucrats, right? That wore nice clothes, that did the work of like the really powerful feudal lords. But they were slaves. They were not considered their own entities, and they were only extensions of their masters. And that's really accurate in terms of how Brahmanical system, Brahmanism treats the other, right? How it treats the lower caste, or even the caste lower than them, and the non-Hindu, right? They appear as just instruments for the completion of their own subjectivity. So you exist. I mean, this is very clear in like Brahmanical system, is that only because there is a lower caste or untouchable can you have the foundation of a Brahmanical, like hierarchical society, right? Without the lower caste, there's no upper caste. So that's sort of like treating you as an extension and not a being in yourself, not somebody that's an independent entity. That's always been there in the Brahmanical system. And Sikhs come off as Dalits par excellence, right? People that are foundationally untouchable for the Brahmanical side, Brahmanical system, because they not only they're not foreign, they can't be ostracized like Muslims, that they're outsiders, and they are foundationally against the Brahmanical caste system. So they're extremely like high on their sort of the flow of their animosity or their hatred, right, as a society. And I think they do want to look. They want to look like victims at the surface, but underneath the surface, the society really revels and really enjoys the violence against others like Sikhs. Anyway, those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. Like there's this enjoyment, right? And is that enjoyment, Amandeep Paji, is that rooted in jealousy and self-hate? That's what I think. And I might be wrong. I'm just thinking kind of right now. Like, so then it makes sense. Like, suppose I was talking to another friend of mine, right? And I'm not talking about the Brahmins per se, who are the controlling mind, right? I'm talking about the non-Brahmins who become like the foot soldiers so willingly. The Rajputs, the Baniyas, they also become like a rabid Hindu nationalists. And is that their kind of thing kind of hidden in shame, like when they look at like other religions like Sikhi and or Christianity or Islam, and then they look at themselves like, what do we have? Then it generates a sense of like jealousy, which converts to hate, and then they literally cannot uplift themselves, so they basically have to bring that thing down.
It's a weird thing because unlike let's say like a Shia or Muslim or a Sunni extremist, right, that just wants Muslim supremacy or whatever. There's a very different thing going on with Hindutva and Brahmins, is that they don't have any boundaries. Like they say everybody's a Hindu, right? So there is no, like on paper, they're claiming everybody as their own extensions, their younger brothers, right? The Aryans of Europe are the younger brothers of the Brahmin Aryans in their way of thinking. And, Mecca is a Hindu temple that got turned. It was supposed to be Ram and became Rahim, and, all of this mythology. So they on one hand, they have this logic that everybody is us. We are the root of everyone. So there's no distinction. And on the other side, they have a very rigid ontological, distinction between themselves and the lower caste. So
Right.
we are the absolute. We're not made of the same substance. Like that's the difference between Dalits and Brahmins in their head. Is that it's not that your skin is different. It's that your thought,
Correct.
right, what you're made of.
No, that is part of the religion, right? Because the Brahman is coming from the head, the Rajput is coming from the arms of the and Shudra is coming from the butt, and the untouchable is coming from the feet. So that
That's the difference, right? Untouchable is not coming from the feet. The
He's outside.
untouchable is so impure, it can't be touched.
Oh, they are
So
not
it's
even part of the
divine
system.
body.
They're not.
No, that's the categorical, ontological difference. Is they're saying you are like a rock. You come from a different source. You're not part of the the divine body of Brahma, the Purushottama, right? That you're not composed of the same divine substance. And this is the bit that gets lost, right, in the liberal discourse, is that they perceive Brahmanism as another form of discrimination. It's a metaphysics. It's a cosmological, metaphysics that divides the world into pure and impure.
No, but in the no, that is, I think that's true. But like, I'm trying to really understand what drives their urge to conduct these false flag operations. Like,
Who are Jats and Ramgadiyas?
Oh my God! Can you?
Oh my God.
There's the category of Shudra and Chandal. If you look at the historical texts,
Really?
Jats have been considered Chandal by Brahmins.
Not mute me.
Okay.
Or they have been considered Shudra.
Got it. Got it. Look, anybody is welcome.
Was
Okay.
this?
No, anybody is welcome to have a conversation. But if you're going to come and jump in, like, and disturb the conversation, then you are, you don't deserve to be up there. So,
No, we don't act like Indians.
yeah, this is not an Indian space. Okay. This is a space where we have conversations. And what
We can get into it.
we are no no but here Aman Paji dekho we are having a conversation, and you are coming here and trying to distract the whole topic. We are discussing the Brahmanical violence and the caste discrimination. Now you can agree with it, you can disagree with it, you can come and put up an argument, but your argument is neither in either saying in support of it, or you are not saying no, this is not right, or this is what is actually happening. You are making a very senseless argument. You are trying to deflect by saying, oh, what about you? You are also casteist. Like, what does that mean? What does the argument mean in this context? The whole world could be casteist and racist. We are talking about here the Brahmanical, concept. And why don't you just explain that first? This gaslighting, constant gaslighting, and this way of arguing is very typical of the Hindu mind, and I am sick of it. Like, that's why there's no point having any conversation with them. Like,
Also, I think that's no, let's not ridicule. I mean, look, let's get into the history, right? There's an entire history. जिथे जटां ते ब्राह्मणां ਦੀਆਂ ਲੜਾਈਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, right? And those happened in 8th century, 9th century, in Vedic period. So their own history and their historiography around this. So they themselves acknowledge that Brahmins had to fight these Chandals called Jats because they were not digesting, or basically the Jats were not accepting the hierarchy.
yeah.
So there's major conflicts that are in their own history.
No,
right?
Aman Pari, this is the difference of Guru Nanak's land versus the rest of India. You go to this rest of India, and you talked about the farmer is at the bottom of the pyramid, and the Pandit, this Brahman, is at the top. You come to Punjab, all you Brahmins are at the bottom. Okay, the farmer is at the top, and we'll always keep the farmer at the top. The people who work with it.
You don't even need to go all the way to the rest of India. You go across the border from Punjab to Rajasthan.
Yeah.
And you look at how they treat Jats in those areas.
Yeah.
They are not allowed to enter their temples.
Yeah.
That's the living condition of Jats right across the border.
Yeah.
No, this is not some fantasy. Like you can go and look at it. There's real studies done on this. Like Jat suicide that's in these agrarian areas is way higher than the other.
The recording kind of.
Yeah, let's keep it on the topic. We'll get distracted. I know Marshall has his hand raised. Let's go to Marshall. I'm saying then we'll come to you. Marshall, go ahead.
All right, I'm at my house and I have been listening, so I listen to this other stuff. But just going back to the word, for the Brahmin way of doing things. So I looked up chattel slavery. So the definition is chattel slavery is a system where humans are treated as property, bought, sold, and owned like livestock, a dehumanizing and violent system of abuse and subjugation. So, I mean, India is not technically buying and selling people, but again, I think that livestock part really fits into how Brahmins see everybody else in the caste, especially those at the very lower end. And then I was thinking about it too, and there's parallels in European history where we've got, the Romans. The Romans practiced that kind of slavery where if you weren't a Roman, I mean, you were up for grabs. So, you get sent to the circus, killed as a slave. And then I'm a little bit careful with this one because I don't want any Brahmins to be puffy pigeons over it. But the Spartans had a very rigid caste system, and Brahmins are no Spartans because Brahmins are shitless, scared.
No, but Marshall, the slavery.
The Spartans had a The Spartans had a system of slavery where their slaves, if they thought their slaves got too numerous, they would hunt them. The slaves had their own kind of areas in the hills and stuff, and they were hunted like wild animals just on a lark if the Spartans felt like doing that. So I like that kind of really, really animalistic slavery, I think, is more in line with how the Brahmins implement their caste system, where like you were saying, Arjit, like, what is the word for this? Where people are just, they're nothing. And I think, chattel slavery, in the lines of the more brutal ones in history, and the Spartan one would be one of those, is in line with how the Brahmins act.
No, I think it's worse. No, Coin has his hand raised, and I'll tell you from my experience why. ਇੱਕ ਮਿੰਟ ਹਾਂ ਲਾਲ ਭਾਜੀ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਮਿੰਟ ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲ ਇਹਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇਣ ਨਿਕਲ ਜਾਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਨਾ ਤੇ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ so in the Brahman form of slavery is so cruel, it will keep the person at such subsistence and subhuman level that the person himself will offer you to be himself to be sold. The people in India offer themselves, their kids, to be sold. I can tell you my own experience. I was in this is year 2003, I would say, and I went to this. I was in the Air Force. I landed in. We had to go to this trekking expedition somewhere in the mountains and Himalayas. So I landed in Bagdogra. Bagdogra is in West Bengal, very poor area, and we went for. And it's very close to Nepal. And I, with a couple of other of my course mates, we went. Okay, let's go and go to the city and have look around the city. And I can tell you, we were in this, like, it was piss poor. Like, you can't find a restaurant to eat food, and we were hungry, and we saw this tea kind of a shop. Thought this didn't knew what they sell. We asked, "Do you have tea?" He said, "Yes, we have tea." And we said, "Okay, bring tea." The tea was so bad we couldn't drink it. But after we were talking, this guy who was the tea seller supposedly with a shop, he comes and he holds my legs. Okay, he drops them and he starts crying. And he said, you look like," he said, "a good man. And I was hearing your conversation and I need your help." I said, "Okay, tell me how I can help you." He said, "I had 5 daughters. And this daughter of mine, I love her the most. And she has the ability to live life, and there is no future for her. And I think she's 5 years old. Can you please take my daughter with you? And you can use her as a slave. She will do everything. She's very smart. But at least she'll have a life. Just take my daughter with you. Take her. एक मिनट लाल पाजी, ठीक है? एक मिनट खड़ते हो. Take her with you, and at least you will give her food, because I can't even give her food here." And I was so embarrassed. How can I take somebody's kid? So somehow I was trying to get out of that shop. And then, he came, he realized that I'm not taking, and he needed money. Then he said, "Look, if you guys, my wife is there. If you guys want to, have sex, she can offer her to yourself." And there she is. And we were like we were flabbergasted. I had never seen such a thing ever in my life. And this is not a aberration, Marshall. This is the real story of 70% of Hindus. People who are called Hindus by these guys. 70% of the population of India lives like this. And so this is the different form of slavery. You keep these people at such subhuman level that they offer themselves for everything. Like, you can do whatever you want with them. Anji Lal Paji, go ahead. Then we go to answer. Yeah.
Is a Shudra low class, and mother was Shudra used to pick a tatti for Hindus in New Delhi, and he ate the tatti, and now he works for an IT cell, and I'm not pretty much listening. I actually sent him a friend request, and I can knock his ass down anywhere in the world. That's what I'm saying. He's a low class Hindu Shudra. Like, he's not a Hindu, he's not even allowed to enter the temples, but their genes got corrupted by eating a fucking Brahman shit. That's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
Go ahead, Anthony.
मैं बस इतना की कहना सी, because the topic was the massacre, right? You asked one, what term might be used. We were to kind of not go as far as to, analyze the Brahmin and their mindset and approach to treatment of human beings, and keep it kind of concise to just, the corruption of power of the state, I would use the word false flag atrocity, right? And then you could pair it with atrocity propaganda as just a mechanism of the state to kind of pursue its pursuits. But I just mainly came up here to reference an article that I came across. But there were 5 people in a neighboring town that were killed in the days after the massacre, right? 5 Kashmiri men were abducted and then burnt, to a crisp, right? Like, so it could be identifiable.
That 5 people were killed on. So the ChithiSingpora massacre happened on 20th of March. Bill Clinton lands on 21st of March. And Bill Clinton immediately, he was briefed by the CIA that this is what actually happened. And he kicks up a row. And then the Indian government, to kind of cover up its feet, it picks up 5 Muslim youth who were then murdered on 25th of March and buried. And they claim these were foreign mercenaries. But before those 5 were killed, also after those 5 were killed, I think it's around 30th of March that 8 more protesters were killed who were, protesting against that this killing or this so-called claim by the Indian government that these were the foreign mercenaries who had done this. And so there were 8 of those who were killed that I'm aware of. And then, so in total now it's like total dead is 48. Murdered, like not said dead, like murdered in cold blood by the Indian state. So I don't know anything outside that. Maybe there's some more things related. There were some people they arrested and then claiming they were Pakistani, but they were like literally like gods. They couldn't convict them in any court of law. Who are they going to convict? It is the Indian army who did it. So that's, but any other people any other innocents who were killed, I'm not aware of. These are the things I'm aware of. I'm saying if you have some more information added, I'll be more than happy to research.
Okay, cool. I just had a misunderstanding before, but so all these events were related, and the article I linked just kind of lays out a timeline for it, which is kind of clear. And then, so I guess these 5 men have been convicted, but it took like 16 years or something, right, for the courts, for the army to allow the courts to pursue it, or maybe it's the other way around. Yeah, that was all.
No. So the Indian system, the way it works is when there's too much public pressure, okay, that and it comes out in the open that the army killed some innocents. What they do is they will order a disciplinary inquiry. The army will kind of try those people inside. Typically, they will say court-martial, and then so they'll be given some punishment. But then these people will be asked to go and appeal in armed forces tribunal, okay, where they can launch an appeal. And in 99.99% of the cases, their punishment will be revoked and they'll be actually given more money for what they have done. So this is the standard operating procedure of the Indian state, okay? So what they will tell you, hey, there's too much pressure. We have to tell the world that we actually took action. But then you can go to this tribunal, and the tribunal is already told that you have to basically set aside all the punishment, and that news will never be published by the media, okay? And the media kind of plays a hand, but this is a standard procedure. So the people will be told some action was taken, but in reality, no action is taken.
Okay. Yeah, it says here that 5 of them were Yeah, so charge sheets were filed against 5 personnel, and then basically nothing happens with it.
Yeah, so actually it'll be good in case are there names of those people, because what this officer under Pannu's interview is claiming is that many people have been who were part of this operation, okay, from the army side.
Well,
So the
okay,
Indian
so
state has
it's
killed them.
5 people with the admission that others were involved as well. So that's the conclusion of the CBI investigation.
Okay, but these are the ones who were killed, the 5 Muslim youth. Okay, so that is a different team. The people who killed the 5 Muslim youth is different, but the unit which did this operation against the Sikhs is a different unit. And the group of people which came and murdered the Sikhs, the new interview that Mr. Pannu has published, as per that, the testimony of that officer, Rathod, none of the people who were in that operation are now living. Indian state has actually eliminated them. And I don't know what is like. Maybe why would they eliminate them? I think they probably eliminate them under international pressure. Maybe that is the unofficial rule that US and other governments who have the say kind of put out, that hey, if your people do something and they are caught, you have to eliminate them. So that way we can forget about it, and then we can all be goody goody next day. Maybe that was the price. So maybe the poor foot soldiers paid the price to keep the India's diplomatic relationship good with the West, and so that India can still be called the largest democracy in the whole world. It is such a sham. I think there is some blame to be put on the Western government stores at once. After knowing all this, Bill Clinton still goes and hugs the presidents of the other world. What is the need for you to hug? Until it's just self, once you know these are mass murder, like you can just do business with them. Do business. Nobody's stopping you to do business. But what is the need to kind of call them democracy, people to people contact, like with murderous regimes? There is no need, just your old self greed, I would say, or weakness.
Okay, so what's changed is so for the 5 that were killed in a false encounter, an investigation revealed 5 members of the army that were that had charge sheets filed against them. What happens with them is unknown, but those that committed the massacre, right, are all dead according to that interview. And Pannu's new findings suggest that Doval was one that was involved behind or masterminded and carried out that operation. And that's what's new, right? Is that, and then there's a new whistleblower, right? That was part of the operation.
That's correct.
He's alive, but everyone else is maybe dead. And then there's also just like 2 or 3, there's only a few witnesses of the massacre, right? Like, and they're both Singhs. One's like Nanak Singh, and then there's another person. And I wonder if those people are still alive.
No, there are many witnesses of the massacre. The people who were part of the crowd, like who were shot at, that is only 2 who survived. But there were women who were watching from the houses, right? They were told not to watch, but they were obviously looking. They would be curious what is being done to their men. They saw all this happen.
Do you know if those 2 survivors of the actual massacre are still alive or not?
That I'm not aware. But actually, the report actually casts doubts on one of the survivors, whose name is Nanak Singh, that he's not a reliable. Maybe he was already working in consonance with the army. And then kind of the other one is the genuine one who survived, the Nambardar.
Great, that was all I had to contribute. Well, I don't think I contributed. I just confused things and then we rehashed them out. So thanks.
Aman Paji, if you can continue, or Marshall, if you can continue for 5 minutes, I'm just finishing my dinner. That's all. I'm trying to manage both of these things. But Aman Paji, you were making a great point. If you can just keep, I think it's always great to listen to your points, and then I know we talk sometimes on phone, but yeah, if you can share with the team.
Can I just make a quick point? Sorry,
Yeah,
just what
go ahead,
Ed
fine.
said.
Yeah.
So if the Indian government is going to the extent of killing anyone involved from the Indian army side, then I think that is a very interesting question that MC raised. If other witnesses, have they been disappeared? And the other point I wanted to make was that, yeah, it would be technically called a red flag incident. And the victims, because you were saying, what do we call the victims? They're basically, I would say, victims of state-sponsored terrorism. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those work, right? I don't think there's anything wrong in using those words. I was just thinking about, the larger logic and how Indian or, Hindu violence offers like a distinctive form of violence, right? That's not limited to the political, limited to the economic, or even status violence, because what's at the heart of it is not suppressing people, right? It's producing socially dead people, right? That's why the idea of the slave works so well. And the logic is not that everybody that's a slave is in chains, or that everybody that's a slave is a commodity to be traded, right? Because that's not the definition of being a slave, right? Because you can have slaves that were working in high posts in different places, right? As bureaucrats, in China and Turkey and stuff, the Ming Dynasty, or you could have, they're not property because there's other examples of people being property and not being slaves. For example, women in most pre-modern societies basically were traded around, as almost like commodities. But they weren't slaves. Right? The true definition, right, of a slave is somebody that's socially dead, that doesn't have an beginning and an end in terms of the violence that can be done to them. And there's no consequences to what you do with them. And I think Sikhs occupy a very slave-like position in the Indian state or the Hindu civilization's, system, because even at the political level, there's not as much backlash that you can expect after you slaughter 35 Sikhs, right? If the same could be said about recent killings, right? And or miscalculations around that, like Shaheed Nijar, maybe they were under the impression that the elections are coming up, the Sikhs are an easy target. There won't be that great of a response anyway. And so you get, you have your cake and you eat it too. You look like a macho man who's killing, these terrorists, so-called threats to the nation state, and do not have to face any serious backlash. So at the political level and at the the deeper sort of psychological level, Sikhs occupy this place of slavery where they can be targeted without consequences. And I think one important bit that's very important, right, is that in order to be socially dead, in order to be a slave, your experience doesn't have to resemble that experience of a slave, right? Not every single Dalit in India is poor. There are people that are, that have tens of millions of dollars that are Dalits, that are black, that are, in the US context, or Sikhs that are, close to being billionaires. So it's not your experience, right, that matters. It's your structural positioning. Whether you experience that form of slavery or that violence, whether it actually happened to you or not, is not what's important. Is that you're open to it, right? So I think social death or socially dead beings or slaves is a pretty, I think, accurate description of these type of people that are, that occupy this such a vulnerable, open position in the Brahmanical system. And I think we should keep going back to the Brahmanical instead of the Indian, because the Indian is kind of a camouflage, right? They present themselves as a state, And so all of the violence that they do looks like a state's violence against XYZ rebels. But that's not what's really happening, right? Like states don't, for example, all the self-harm that they did, right, in targeting Sikhs, in targeting Muslims, in targeting all these very productive parts of their own society, that any developing nation state wouldn't have done that, right? If they really were sincere towards their own development, they wouldn't have opened up, 7 freedom fighting movements in different parts of the country when they just received this big mandate to rule, right? The Sikhs chose to go with India, right? The Muslims that stayed chose to stay with India. So the logic that grounds the Indian violence is not that of a nation state, right, or political violence. It's coming from a much deeper, like Brahmanical psyche. That's there. That's not just some political, intellectual imagination of some elite. It's the foundation of the entire, subcontinent for the last 2 millennia at least. And so I think it's much more formidable, much more resilient, much more terrible, right, than just a political actor gone rogue.
Yeah, but isn't it the fact that that's true that the deeper roots are more caste based, even like Brahmanical. But the fact is that that Indian state is the vehicle or the tool that is they've been using, right? And if the Indian state was not handed over to them, yeah, there would still be a struggle with them, but it would not be so vicious. And the fact that Indian state exists, it creates a structure of incentives where wherein it is so easy now to give the call of unity and integrity out of India that have been made like the religion of people. And that's why you see even Sikhs participating in this violence, like people like KPS Gill, people like
Exactly.
so
I think
yeah.
that's a really interesting question, right? Like, how do Brahmins, how did they survive Buddhist rule? Like, how did the caste system come out intact out of 500 years of Buddhist rule or 1,000 years of Mughal presence? I think that's the truly productive question,
Yeah.
because it goes beyond political calculation rationale. And this is why the experience
No,
part,
for example, for example, suppose the British, imagine a scenario. The British had not left the Indian state as it is, and they said, okay, this Indian state is a colonial empire, and it's an artificial creation. And the reality is that the real nations are, the Sikhs are a nation, the Tamilians are a nation, Bengal, they are free from tomorrow, and they can decide how they want to run. Now that in that context, the Punjab would have figured out, our communities never were fighting with each other. The fight between the partition of Punjab was caused by people who were looking for the power of the state, the Muslim League and the Hindu Congress. And the whole problem is rooted, it's a political problem of power there as well. And today, like, you have this fight between India and Pakistan. There are nuclear weapons they are willing to throw at each other. The reason is that there's an Indian state which exists, and the Pakistan has to react. We can't even go across to Lahore, which is because the Indian state doesn't want us to go. If the Indian state was not there as this kind of damaging entity, the West and East Punjab has nothing to fight with each other. People love each other at a people level. That this border will go off overnight.
Absolutely. I don't think
Yeah.
there's
So
if let's say this state isn't there, it wasn't there until 80 years ago. Us to pehla jehde 600 years of direct Mughal rule, the half a millennia of Buddhist rule, basically powers that are antithetical to Brahmanism, that oppose it, that are trying to convert people, that are very much antagonistic to its hierarchy. How does Brahmanism not only remain intact, but how do they keep caste system intact? They even actually thrive, right? From up until Gupta's, the scholarship is that Brahmins were able to utilize their position as strategists to mold policy, right, in the Buddhist states. They were able to do the same, in many ways in Mughal era. And what I'm trying to hint at is that if there is a different form of, if there's a different form of violence that underlies Indian or grammatical violence, right? It's not just another nation state doing violence against its dissidents. It's much deeper. And the way it does that, I mean, this is my, you can say, thesis is that they're not just fighting a political battle, they're fighting the battle of essentially creating and molding the civilization's desire, right? So people that are not Brahmins themselves feel that they are connected to this system and they should be in service of it. And so you don't have to be, you know, that this also connects with the other point that you don't have to be a slave in order to be positioned as a slave. As far as you don't need to be sold, you don't need to be open to experience that type of violence. You can still be an instrument, right, for that system, be used for it, be fighting for it, without experiencing the violence directly. I think that's what happens with all the lower castes and the upper lower castes, that they get in line and they do the work and they position themselves, you know, as subservient to Brahmins, and they end up propagating the system, even when it's even at their own disadvantage. Like look at the Punjabi Hindus, right? The entire history of Punjabi Hindus since 47 is that of, you know, choosing self disadvantages, self loss, loss of business, loss of all types of you know, self harm to favor the central government, right, against Sikhs. And I'm just opening that up as a serious question to think about, because it points to like of the problem being beyond political rationality and political violence, right? Like how do you survive in a foreign rule for hundreds of years without having, you know, some insight into how to mold people's desires?
Yeah. No, I think one of the things that it is obvious it does is the caste hierarchy is self-reinforcing in the sense that it creates, it's not a system like in US, like it was a master and a slave. Okay, so there is a slave now has an incentive to hopefully kind of rebel against the master. But in the Indian system, the slaves have their own slaves. So everybody has a slave. Like, so Brahmins are on the top. They're not a lot, but like they're like 5% on the top. But then you have the number two. But the number two has rest all 3, 4, 5 as their slaves. Number 3 has 4 and 5 as his slaves. Number 4 has 5 as his slave. The most undone is the guy who is outside who has no slaves. So now everybody in that hierarchy, they'll say, okay, I don't get anything. Like I'm not on the top, but I have these people underneath. And and it's a pyramid. As you keep going down, then like the number of people underneath you keep kind of going up. Yes, I don't have as much rights as a Brahmin. And then on top of this, you kind of give it a religious sense. And every scripture will talk about Brahman is the best. You know, Brahman, you have to treat him like this. And you have to get married, you have to go to a Brahman. You have to get, you die, you have to go to a Brahman. You need medicine, you have to go to a Brahman. They have ways written on medicine. And so then he enters every aspect of your social life. So it's okay to give him the holy man, the topmost thing. And then everybody underneath them is now basically, you know, one above the other. And already these people, you know, they love to hate each other. And because they ethnically are different. And then, you know, you basically, the system becomes so resilient that nobody wants the system to kind of go away unless and until you have a revolutionary like, you know, Guru Nanak, who comes and says, no, this is unacceptable. Like, we are going to be the Khalsa. You're not even going to use your surname with your thing. You're going to just throw that away. And you are a Khalsa, and Manas ki Jaat is a ek. Every human being is going to be equal. And there is no such thing, you know, called this caste, that caste, blah, blah, blah. You have to forget it. And then there are some basic core principles and rights. Everybody has those. And unless you come with that revolutionary attitude, you will very soon get subsumed by the system. And then, if it is your religion, what do you do? If you are born as a Hindu, for example, you and I are lucky to getting birth in the house of Guru Nanak. But if I was born as let us say, a Khatri Hindu, what option do I have? rather than to become a worshipper of the Indian state, which is now the Hindu Rashtra. Finally, we have gotten power after hundred thousands of years of Muslim rule, and now I can we can we have, I can really propagate my religion. And then I see the Sikh, like they have this very nice gurdwaras. They are not doing the same stupid stuff that is there in my books. Oh, why are they like this? Like they're on langars. They actually have a spiritual path. They also are warriors. They are brave. So what will that do to a Hindu mind? It will generate intense amount of jealousy and hate. So the only option that I will be left with if I am a Hindu is two. One is either reject the very stupid faith that I am in, where when you read the scripture, that's why no Hindu will ever read their own scriptures because it's full of crap. So either I have to reject Hinduism and become a Sikh, or I have to say that Sikhi is part of my religion. Like Sikhs are not different, they are Hindus. I have to bring Sikhs down to my level. That's the only two options you get as an upper caste Hindu.
We're still kind of looking at the level of faith and believing in an XYZ proposition, right? Because when we think about religion, which is not a native term, right? We think about like confessional faiths and thinking about believing XYZ types of beliefs, and that makes us. Well, what's happening in this context is that it's not the beliefs, right, that are the problem, according to the Brahmanical perspective, right? It's you can have all the types of beliefs and systems and your own paths and all of that, but it's your ontological being, right? Like what you are, what you're made of. That's the problem. So when they think about purity and impurity, it's or the low and the high, the Brahmin, the Dalit. It's not about what they're thinking in their head, right? It's about what they're made of, like substantially. So that's why you see the entire Indian left, right, which professes, Marxist even or liberal progressive ideals, but their practice and the way they actually engage with the problem, with all of these problems, is exactly the same as upper caste conservative, Brahmin, right? Because I think 2 months ago or 2 years ago, there was a Quality Labs case against Cisco here in the U.S. against upper caste Brahmins discriminating while hiring for Cisco, right? And they would ask these tangential questions when they're interviewing, like, "Are you vegetarian by birth, or did you choose?" So they're pulling out these signifiers to figure out whether they're lower caste or not, whether they're higher. So it's your practice, right, at the level of how you end up building a life, how you think of the other, how you relate to the other, and you can think about yourself in all types of different ideologies and ways. And I think that's why it's not a political problem, right? It's not a problem of like a progressive, like consciousness raising of the masses, right? This is not more contact. Contact is not going to solve this problem, right? The contact theory says that you just have more engagement, tell each other more stories and let people know who you are and you're human. That's not going to do it, because they know exactly who you are, and their psyches are basically cultivated in this way for thousands of years to relate to you in this way, right? Between the two spectrum, the two poles of like pure and impure, like Brahmin and Dalit. And you're right, like everybody fits into it. But I think there's a consensus for everybody that's in the upper caste. There's a consensus that yes, we're not Brahmins, but we're sure as hell not Dalits, right? That there's like a pretty clear consensus around that that's not human. That this is the society of humans, the upper caste, and that's subhuman or non-human. And that's why they have to live on the other side of the town. And that's why even their, shadow is defiling. And like impurity is very different from like an ethnic or a racial, that's the big difference between like racism and casteism and caste, like metaphysics, is that it's not about your physical look, right? It's not about your phenotype. there's Dalits that are like very fair and wear light colored, but still there is their being, right? And I think that's the big part that doesn't get registered in these liberal or like progressive circles, is that this is not about discrimination. This is about your positioning in a civilization, you know, in a metaphysical like form of racism, how it views you before you even act, right? And there's no form of action that's going to get you out of it. That's a big difference from like Greek and Roman slave societies, is that there was a way out, right? There's ways you can buy yourself out of slavery. There's ways you can work yourself out of it. You can't do that until the next lifetime in this system, right? You have to go through it, and
Yeah.
you
No, but
basically your best chance is to serve.
you can, yeah, you can call me a bit more optimist, but I do believe that the only path out of this is the path of the Guru. It is the divine path of, and the only thing that's going to save. And people can be taken out of it. We have examples. We have, yes, we kind of love to blame Brahmins, but it's not that every Brahmin is the same. People give up these beliefs, and we have Pai Matidas and Satidas, I think, our own martyrs. And but to shake people out of this, okay, you need a revolutionary movement, and that is where I say that the Khalistan is what we have to define. It is Khalsa Raj. The Khalsa Raj, which is based upon the core revolutionary principles of Guru Nanak, which is that Raj, once we are free, we are who are the lucky ones to be born in this path or panth or religion, we can, we have to gain our sovereignty back and set something up which can be a good example for people around there. And, and then we can spread the message of Guru Nanak. Without that, we cannot. And I have full, I'm an optimist. It might come through a lot of bloodshed. Eventually, Khalsa Raj will come in Punjab, and then it will spread. It will spread everywhere in the subcontinent. But it will not spread. Some people feel right now, okay, we can just go and do Gurbani and people will suddenly leave it. No, the fact is that is where you need the Miri and Piri. You need the state as well. If you're just going to go there and tell people to, yes, you can do that, but how are people going to live as self-respecting human beings in face of a tyrannical state? Eventually they'll have to get in conflict with that state to keep their head held high. And so that is why the concept of Miri Piri is so enlightening and so important in modern world today. A individual can only attain his full potential in a society which is governed on these principles, that individual is sovereign, that the right to bear arms is sacred God-given right, that the governments have to be limited, that the people have the right to freedom of religion, right to freedom of speech. And then on top of that, you have to have a religion which moderates and gives people a spiritual path. Otherwise, what happens is societies degrade into other movements, because morality is not innate to human beings. So if you don't have a benign religion giving you morality or spiritual path, the youth will end up searching for, morality in other ideologies like Marxism or LGBTQism and all that stuff. That's what we are seeing in front of our eyes in the West. The youth, because I'm not saying Christianity is right or wrong, but whatever forms it was practiced, let us say it is practiced in a benign form, it will give people some level of morality and stability in life. If you take that away from that human being, he cannot decide what is right and wrong. He will look for an ideology, and that ideology could be either a leftist Marxist ideology that will become his religion, or BLM will become the religion, or LGBTQism will become the religion. You always need an ideology to help you look at the world and say what is right and what is wrong. And the best mirror in my book that is given today and we are lucky to having been born with that mirror, is a Guru Nanak's mirror, which is right there in front of, in form of Guru Granth Sahib in front of us. And I believe a society based on those spiritual principles, where you do things through voluntarism, like seva, you don't kind of dictate it to people, but then you draw red lines on, that you cannot take away somebody's right. Those are the principles on which a society will be formed, and that's on which Khalsa Raj will be formed, Paji. That's what we are going to form, and that's the fight about, and it will happen in our lifetime.
I have just one bit before I have to leave, but I think that I didn't mean to imply that there's no exit. In fact, I mean, another way to say what you're saying is that the fight for Khalistan is not a land dispute, right? It's the fight for a different way of relating to human beings. It's a different way of relating to the cosmos, and it's a different way of relating to what is truth, right? Because what we're fighting is not a political system. We're fighting a cosmological, is a cosmology and a metaphysics of a racial difference, right? That's the true enemy, right? That's the enemy that's there prior to the state, the instrument called Indian nation state, and that's the system that we're going to fight even after Palestine is established. And it's that existential restructuring of relations that's at the heart of it. Nobody sacrifices their life, their family's lives, for a piece of land, right? It's the larger truth and the ability to live authentically and to be able to live truthfully, right? From in your ideals, and not suffocate to death, whether slow death or a spectacular death. I think that's really at the heart of it. And the other side that I wanted to just touch on is that what true sovereignty is, right? Or what sovereignty in this context especially is that it's a way of relating, right, to the world that is non-utilitarian. What does that mean? That means that all systems of violence, especially these sort of metaphysical, theological ones, like Brahmanism, they're systems of accumulation, right? Their entire being is built upon accumulating not just material wealth, not just social and political power, but accumulating almost like being, right? Because what they're extracting from the Dalit or from the Sikh or from these others is not their material wealth, material commodities, or possessions, properties. They're extracting their being, right? They don't want. There's no material to be had from a Dalit. There's no property that they own. There's no other attribute that, there's nothing else they can offer. And so all slave-master relations are built on this, right? It's the slave provides dignity in being, right, to the master. And so it's a system of accumulation. Like Brahmins, just like I would say capitalists and other forms of like racial, violence, it's about accumulation. And what Khalistan and what Khalsa does is it's a system of giving, right? It's a system of living without utilitarian. It's a way of being without utility, right? So you don't accumulate, you give. And all of our institutions are built on this logic, right? Langar, Gurdwara, Saran, even the very fundamental act of taking Amrit, right? You're giving your head, right? You're giving your material possessions. And that's at the heart of our conception of sovereignty, is to live in a way that that doesn't have utilitarian consumption at its heart. It's irrational, or you can say anti-rational giving, right? That really makes us sovereign. The sovereign is not, the sovereign is the one who can basically create the exception and create their own rules. And so the true way of resisting like an existing system like Brahmanism is not to follow its logic and try to outdo it, but to sidestep it entirely and challenge it from the very ground. And that's why all of the liberal, progressive, or conservative sort of middle grounds of let's reform India, let's make a better, let's find some middle ground. It's not going to work because it doesn't acknowledge the problem, right? You have to start from a new beginning, and it has to be a complete uprooting and a decimation of the system. But Hanji, that's all I had.
No, no,
Thank you.
perfect, Bhaji. But Jan to pehla, I know I love to kind of agree with every single word you said. But I'm going to add one thing. We need the land and we need the state, and we will get that land and we'll get that state. And because without that,
I didn't mean to say that. I'm saying it's not reducible.
no, I'm not reducing it to it, but I'm saying it's not a sufficient condition, but it is a necessary condition. And if we don't have the state, if we don't have that land, I can tell you, like, we will never be able to win that war. महाराज कहते ने जिवें ना शस्त्रन के अधीन है राज राज बिना ना धर्म चले है ਧਰਮ ਬਿਨਾ ਸਭ ਦਲੇ ਮਲੇ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਮੰਨ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਦਾ ਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਹਾਂ
just wanted to, so that was for people that think that this is a political fight about a piece of property.
Yeah.
ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਛੱਤੀ ਹੋਰ ਮੁਲਕ ਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਇੱਕ ਬਣ ਜੂਗਾ, right? What's the difference? This is the difference. ਇਹ ਉਸ context ਦੀ ਗੱਲ
got it.
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ, ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਲਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਬਿਜ਼ੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ, ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। I'll be listening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I, as Paji goes right, this is I kind of want to pull the things back towards this particular, a revelation that has come from Mr. Pannu, because there's one aspect of it I think which has to be talked about a lot more. And somebody just shared this with me, man. This is like I'm so lucky when I come to these Twitter spaces. People are so knowledgeable. They just don't share their knowledge. I'm like, there are many people here who are really smart. Okay, so this was shared just right now by a gentleman. Okay, and I want to show it on the screen here. And if you are watching the live stream, you can probably see it there. This is a news story. Indian Army officer wanted for Kashmir murder shoots family in Fresno. A former Indian Army officer wanted in the gruesome killing of a human rights lawyer in the disputed Kashmir region has shot his wife and two of their children to death in the Fresno County home Saturday after apparently committing suicide. Avtar Singh, 47, wanted in the 1996 kidnapping and murder of Jalil so and so, says he basically killed his own family. There are many such Indian Army officers, okay, Indian police officers, whom the Indian state has turned into zombies, whom the Indian state has forced to commit such horrendous acts in their past when they were serving. These guys are not murderers. These guys who put on the uniform, they don't put on the uniform with the thinking that, tomorrow they are going to torture their fellow citizens or kill their fellow citizens or murder 35 Sikhs or then murder, these 30 people here just for the narrow political aims of the government. So they are not one. There are thousands of such people and they are victims as well. I think they need to take some courage. Look at what this officer did, Rathod, who basically fled India, and then he not only survived, he's now telling the tale. And anybody who is in the Indian forces, who has been made to do such inhuman acts, man, the world is not like India. Okay, don't just look at everything is okay, you can't speak up. You can. There are countries here who have a concept of human rights, who have a concept of that humanity has to be saved. There is it's not like India everywhere where everything is about money and power. There is something, you can come here, you can escape, you can share your story, at least you can lighten the baggage that you are carrying. And I feel bad for the victims, the 35 Sikhs. I also feel bad for what were those people thinking, the army officers who were asked to do this. What would have been going on in their mind after doing this kind of an act? It's just amazing. How would they be convincing themselves to live without guilt after such an act? And that's I don't know, Marshall, what do you think? Will such an act kind of cause guilt, or Indians are immune to guilt?
The Brahmins are immune to guilt. It seems to me, and but I shouldn't just say Brahmins. This is a disease among the human race. Like, look at what goes on X, right? Look at the things people say to each other on X, and there's no retractions. And people are like, X isn't real, and sure, okay, but people are saying their thoughts that are in their heads. They're typing them out, and the names, the filth, the threats, right? And they're not all Brahmins. I mean, I see it from people who call themselves Christians. I see it from people who call themselves Muslims. I see it from people who kind of call themselves kind progressives, right? There just isn't guilt. It's the human condition for humans who haven't gone through the journey of self-awareness after adolescence, when there's some excuse for that kind of behavior, right? In adolescence, I think we can all agree with that. It's as you grow up, and some people should come out of it sooner rather than later. But I'm sure. Well, maybe not Sikhs. I don't know. Sometimes there's Sikhs see this kind of thing show up in their families, but I know in my families, I've seen this. I've seen this in my churches. There is no guilt. It's not just India. India is just the extreme, crazy, visible example of what's all around us. And if people don't really commit to some kind of higher state, it should be based on God, I think. But kind of anything that'll bump people out of that, selfish, no apology, no guilt, no real empathy, even if they can fake the empathy, anything that can kind of start to bump people out of that state, if they don't start to go through that journey, no, we're not naturally guilty. We're naturally animals. And it's dog eat dog. So again, I think, and also, right, I'm sure we all know, well, I don't actually, but well, I know good Brahmins. I don't know them well enough to know what they experience emotionally, because we haven't spent lots of time together. But I know the ones I know are capable of that self-reflection that would lead to understanding when they've done something wrong, and feeling guilty. So it's about a true commitment to something that's deeper and higher than yourself. And I think what we see out of India is just a full-blown case of this infection that's almost natural to us. So yeah, I do agree that we see it there, and it's mind-boggling what we see out of India. And I think that more so because of the day and age we're living in, where it's perplexing to see this form of slavery, this government-endorsed opinion that all of those who are below this caste are livestock. So it's to a degree that's shocking, but I've seen it in most places of the world not that I've been to lots of places, but I always think back to Haiti when I was there and watching what went on, what people are really like. I've seen people who have far less reason to act like animals than people do in Haiti. Here in Canada, acting like animals, lying about people. And of course, it's not to the extreme of shooting somebody in the head. But the people I know who would do and say things to others, like we see on X, like I've seen him, show up in my own social life, it's just a matter of circumstances, what they can get away with, when, what the pressures are. And they'll start acting like the way that we see it, the most vile people in India acting. And I'm actually 100% positive of that. So, I think it's very visible with India. I think India as a whole is the biggest threat of mass exportation of the full-blown disease. But I do believe it's everywhere, and I believe there's a risk of infection.
Yeah.
Because so many people everywhere else in the world, they like to be animalistic.
I think the difference in India is that the Indian state has taken it to a next level. It has taken it to a next level, which is what the incidences you are talking about here, Marshall, are maybe the only time the West saw that was the rise of Hitler, probably, and Nazism, and and the society learnt a lesson. Okay, and that's why it is looked down upon. Today, you can't put a Nazi flag up and be like proclaimed a hero openly. And well, yeah, there are always some people there, but the ones that are there now are being fanned by India. This whole idea of Nazism is actually being fanned by the Indians. And I was surprised. I was listening to this some conference of conservatives worldwide. Where was this RSS ideologue? There, in the middle of all these white nationalists. Okay, Stephen Harper was there, and this brown guy is preaching them white nationalism and Nazism, literally. And and the Indian state, what it has done is it has to give you a sense, like why it surprises me. Like, I grew up among Hindus of various castes are my friend. Okay, but the moment I will utter anything about right to self determination, that, and it's a very logical right. Sikhs are just 1.5% of India's population, a very small area. Okay, very small area they occupy. Their our religion is different. We can, like, you can look at us, you can see, or you can go to you can figure out everything about us is different. And they have never persecuted the Hindus. The Hindus who live as a minority in Punjab, this is where they are probably the most protected, because there is zero communal incidents there. But then they will, the moment, and they then the Hindus will be my friend all the time. But the moment I will utter anything about, that the Sikhs also have a right to, self determination, it's okay. If people, you can disagree with them, but at least they can talk. They will, even the fact that you talk like this, they will immediately, the people who grew up with me as my childhood friends, with the mere fact that I am saying that we have the right, Sikhs have the right to self determination, that you proclaim all the time that Hindus have a right to Hindu Rashtra, Hindu can build this, Hindu can, fine. Like, we as Sikhs honestly have no problem with Hindu Rashtra. I have no problem with majority of Hindus say that we want a Hindu Rashtra, or Christians say, man, that's fine. It's your business. But when the Sikhs are saying that where we are in majority, we want to live and govern our own laws, and we don't want outside interference, they will immediately turn around and call me terrorist, murderer, and really you could see their emotion. Like, they're convinced about it. They will convince themselves. And so my question is, like, what is it? In such large numbers, I have not found any exception. The only people who don't react in such violently to some of my thoughts, if I ever say we have right to say, is the South Indians. Okay, because they are way far lower caste South Indians, let me say. Okay, but the upper caste, the more the Punjabi he is, more his hostile he will be. Okay, the hostility keeps getting lower as you keep going down to the south. But like, so, and sometimes I'm trying to understand, like, what is it, and I have given myself a logic, like, oh, and the logic I have given myself is this, to justify that why do they behave like this, why such a sudden violent reaction, because what I'm saying is hardly anything. I think and maybe you can comment if that is wrong. I think the Indian state has brainwashed every upper caste Indian that unity and territorial integrity of India, that this is in their subconscious mind. The Indian state is now the Hindu Rashtra, and it gives them a sense of identity, and it gives them a sense of pride in that state being there. And then it kind of lessens a bit of a shame of being a Hindu, because there is nothing to be proud of, like, in that religion. Like, you read the scriptures, they are full of crap, like nonsense. You look at the television channel, what is being spread as religion is, like, you will say, like, what nonsense is this? And pardon my word, but that is truth. And some of the now Western comedians are bringing that truth out in the fault of the world, like Owen Benjamin and all these guys. And so, if you are born as a Hindu, I think there is this deep shame which it gets lessened by the fact that there is a state. And I don't know what's your take. Like, I've struggled, honestly. I don't think I'm fully convinced as yet on my logic as well. But yeah. What do you think? What causes that such a sharp reaction to a Sikh right for self determination?
Yeah, I agree with you that there is, because I've seen that exactly like you said. Northern Hindus, that's exactly how they react. my friends keep it under control, but I know that's because I'm Canadian and they know that there's only so much that I'll be like, shut up. I can say what I want. I live in Canada, right? And they don't want to risk the friendship because, you know, there is a bit of a friendship there. But the Southern Hindus, they don't react the same way at all.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think it's a case of groupthink. You know, if you could imagine yourself, especially if you're a Brahmin, I mean, imagine yourself born thinking you were like the mouth of the gods. You know, the brainwashing starts at the cradle.
Yeah.
Anything that questions that. And again, India, and I'll reiterate, right? India is the most crazy example. But I think most people in the world would and have. And I draw it back into the Spartans, to the Romans. You know, lots of cultures have been born believing that they were next to the gods, that somebody in their group was a god for sure, that all other people were animals. You're born believing that, raised in that. You know, and if it gets questioned in any way as an adult and you still believe it, most people snap because they can't process what they're being told. You know, like, and you know, India, the country's definition of terrorist just isn't the same as Canada's. So we're diametrically opposed, and that is the other thing. And Sikhs think very much their religion is prone to democracy if it isn't actually a democratic model at inception, right? And I want to be careful with that because obviously I'm not familiar enough.
That's fine. You can say
But
that.
you know, that to have developed the way of thinking that Sikhi seems to, when I look at it, in the area of the world that it was conceived, is inconceivable. So
Yeah.
it's wild.
Yeah,
So
it's wild. Yeah, that's true.
It's like, again, well, I was going to say it's like lightning struck your gurus. It did.
Yeah.
Right? God struck your gurus with a bunch of wisdom out of nowhere that should not have really come to them. It must have come from God because it just didn't evolve within this weird area of the world that you were. So again, you know, when you bring up Khalistan, and in Canada we saw this, right? But we didn't react hard. Nobody reacted hard the way that India does to the idea of separation. But there was emotions attached to that. So if I think about that and then those emotions that I saw, and then add to it, okay, and now everybody in English Canada thinks we're gods, and that this country is you know, the Smurf God's special home and stuff like that. I could see how it would just become absolutely unreasonable, and people would flip their lids. It doesn't, and that's the thing, Harvey, right? When you talk about it, you're trying to apply logic. There's no logic.
Yeah.
The worst of the spiritual and the worst of the egotistical, you know, and there is no logic to that, and there's no reason with it. And that's the biggest problem, because I see it as personally, and I believe the way that the West has developed, and not perfectly, but it has developed, we are diametrically opposed, more diametrically opposed than we are to China, China's governing structure, more opposed diametrically than we are to Russia's governing structure. We are diametrically opposed to India's government structure.
Correct.
And it's a big problem because it is so bad that they should be an enemy state. They should be regarded as an enemy state.
Yeah.
And it is weird to me to see our leaders not saying it outright and saying crazy stuff instead.
Yeah. And my fear is that that the Western leadership looks at the Indians in a condescending way, which they should, but they don't look at it like it's a worthy enough enemy. And that could be fatal, because the fact is, even if these civilizations are different, the fact is that the fact that liberty lives in some way or form alive in America is so important. And because if it goes away, you know, if the world is dominated tomorrow by likes of Russia, India, and China, what is that world where will we run? We came here, but where next can we go? So that's kind of you know, like to coming back to that point that you're talking about, right? the Indian situation, you are right. Like there could be emotions attached with the state, and we see that in the Canadian case, but it's not the same, Marshall. Like the hate that I see, okay, in the Indian mind, the moment I talk about self determination, it's like they are okay with getting my family killed, and like but they will justify the 84 massacre, and they will also kind of restate it. Okay, we'll do this to you again. People who kind of grew up, and in their mind, they think we deserved it. Like it's
Oh, no,
mind boggling.
I totally agree with you, Martin. Don't get me wrong on that.
Yeah.
Right? I've literally seen it. I have read on X, right? This crazy talk. I'm not arguing with you about that at all. It's been directed at me to a much smaller degree, right? But the filth that has been said to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, you people are actually nuts. And to have and to live in that as a country, as a Sikh, I cannot even fathom what that must have been like. So don't get me wrong on that.
Yeah.
I've seen it, and I'm like imagine 100 times 100% than what I've seen in this short time. Times 100, and I'm living right next door to people who are saying this to me. It's unfathomable.
Yeah, it's unfathomable, honestly. And so there is some element of the Indian state contributing to it, and there is definitely some element. Whether that's the full answer, I don't know, but like the Indian state has very cleverly, since now 75 years, presented itself as this. You see, like if you are in school, the first thing they'll teach you is unity and territorial integrity of India. When I was growing up as a Sikh, okay, it always used to. Um, I always found it odd. When I went to college, they will make me do this pledge, unity and territorial integrity. And I will watch the TV. This member of parliament is taking oath. It is always unity and territorial integrity of India. I'll do anything for it. Then when I went to the forces, that is the first oath they make you make. Like unity and territorial integrity of India, I will do everything. And I always found it very odd. By the time I was young, like why is this unity and territorial integrity always under threat? Because wherever I go, they make me swear I will do anything for the unity and territorial integrity of India. It's a very odd kind of a pledge, because there is no morality in it. If you think it's kind of morally empty, what it is saying is you will do anything, you will set aside all your morality for unity and territorial integrity of Indian state. Okay, that's what it literally means. And so it always, to me as a Sikh, it was a very odd thing to say, and something that I would sometimes question myself. Okay, what if like they say kill somebody? Will I do that just for the unity and territorial? I will not. Right? It's against my morality and against my religion. And but the majority of Hindus, okay, because Hinduism per se is not a religion, okay, because you ask any question, any person, what is Hinduism? He'll give you a definition. You ask another person to give you another definition. You ask third person to give you another. You ask 1,000 people, you will get 1,000 definitions. Because there is no, it's not a religion. Even Karamchand Gandhi admitted that Hinduism is not a religion. So what happens is, how do you gain morality? Like how do you decide in your life what is right and wrong if you don't have religion giving you morality? So as I said, then you look for ideologies. And so what the Indian state and the Brahmins have done very cleverly is they have made the religion of India unity and territorial integrity of India. So, and then they pump all this nonsense all day to these people. And for people, it is this lens through which they decide what is right and what is wrong. So India has to be always right. India could go and murder, 100,000 people, but as long as India was doing it for unity and territorial integrity of India, it is all justified. Okay, and so it is that lens they come from, and then within that they have added the identity element, and the identity element comes by saying that India is Bharat. Because where is this word Bharat comes from? It comes from Hindu mythological scripture called Mahabharata. So now they are telling them, while their reality, they are making the religion of the person as unity and territorial integrity. They are saying that your religion, Hinduism, is also very great. Look at the scripture, this fantastical comic book that we wrote. You look, in those times, the kings were so powerful. They had nuclear science. They had flying, this thing. This is all going in their mind. On the television, they will show. You have to watch their television serials, Marshall. Like, it's a kind of nonsense that comes. Like, even cartoons don't make that kind of stuff. And and they are worshipping it. And then, so now you have this deadly cocktail, okay, of state making a religion which their people don't know that is their real religion, and then state putting on a veneer of this fake religion called Hinduism on top of it, and this mythology behind it. Oh my god. And then there is caste, and these caste discriminations underlying all this, like exploitation of one tribe by the other. It's a deadly cocktail. And I end up believing that maybe Churchill was right. Because Churchill, when he said, Hindus are a fouled race, it's a very strong statement. But I've started to agree with him.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of it, right? Like, again, this is all, right? My exposure to India was Sikhs and modern Hindus, as far as I knew, for 45 years of my life, 46 years of my life,
Yeah.
right? Until this fall. And then it's like the whole thing has been like, holy crap. So it's one thing that has to sink in after another, right? Even with, I think it was just yesterday that, your point about India making the integrity of India, the rivers of India, as part of the Hindu religion. Okay, that was one of the first time. Maybe it wasn't the first time I've heard it, but it was the first time it started to sink in. Because when you're new to this, and when you're a person who has no experience with the Indian state, except for exposure to pretty decent people out of the subcontinent, there's a lot to take in. So, this thing, I think the point is sunk in now again today with you reiterating that. And because again, then I look back on conversations with some of my Hindu friends, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that totally showed up in what Harjeet just said. Remember that coming up in that conversation. And you don't really think of it as a Canadian. I don't really think of that because it's so alien to me, right? It's like talking about some food that they might eat in India. So I don't really dwell on it because I have no context for it until, I've heard it a couple times and it's like, oh my gosh. But, that is, making the nation of India part of the Hindu religion, reinforced by TV shows. Like, again, I think my oldest son would have got this faster than I have because he developed this fascination with India and what's being said. He's seen through all the propaganda, because when I talk to him about this, he kind of laughs. He's like, oh, yeah, they're like that. Here's another thing that they did. And I'm like, how do you know that? Like, he worked with a lot of dudes who are from India at a pizza place he worked at for a while. And he said, those guys will all flat out tell me they're Indian first if they're Canadian at all, right? So he's kind of like me, where he's pretty fascinated with how people live their lives who aren't right. How do you live outside of our house? How do you live outside of our province? How do you live outside our religion? What's it like? They're people. We're curious. We find out, good people or whatnot. Somebody's not quite as crazy about it as I am, but he wants to understand the mindsets. And it's funny, like I said, it's funny listening to him talk, because I'll come to some new revelation and he will be like, oh, this is how this works, you have to watch this movie. And then I watch it and we watch it together and we have a laugh, but then we kind of look at each other like, this is funny, but it's not funny, because then I tell him all the stuff that I've learned.
Yeah.
We're both a little bit horrified, right? So again,
How old is he?
He's 21.
Oh, he's 21. Okay, so 21 is still okay. Like, it's so helpful actually to talk to kids, to test your assumptions and objectivity, because I've seen, like, the kids are brutally logical. Okay, and I learned so much from my son, because he will logically reach conclusions. He's 6 year old. Okay, about complex subjects which I will never be able to think about. Just to give you an example, today I was talking to him and I was like, I told him, my wife was going to Punjab, and sometimes she say, I'm going to India. I'll always say, no, we are not going to India. We're going to Punjab. So then he picked it up and he said, okay, why? He said, okay, India is bad. He immediately inferred it out. Okay. And then he inferred, okay, so have India, taken over our land? Well, yes. Okay, so India is bad, yes. Have If India has taken over a land, then he said, no, no, it has not only taken over us, then it has taken other people's land as well. And I'm like, oh my God, he's now taking it to another level. 6-year-old kid. And he's teaching me. He's logically thinking, okay, if India is bad and India has taken over Punjab, India has taken over other people's land as well, like Tamilians and these northeastern people. I said, yes, they have. And he said, who people are? The Tamilians and these people. Oh, okay. And, so you are fighting India? Yeah. Okay. When I'll grow up, I'll fight India. Okay. Thank you so much. And, and we're gonna beat them out. I was like, okay, that's fine, man. Thanks. But kind of, to your point, like the kids, there's something about a non-polluted mind, non-conditioned mind, that they are able to arrive at the truth more cleanly if they have the data and the facts in front of them.
Yeah,
And,
like riffing off that a little bit, so it's a little bit off topic, but
yeah,
I think about this a lot in terms of when the world has gone really south
yeah,
and having kids and what a risk they would pose to your household just because of their innocence and their ability to connect the dots quickly, especially smart kids,
yeah,
and how that would play out, right? Like imagine you were in a hot time and living in India with your smart kid who can make these dots, and how do you teach him that he's got to, you can't say this stuff out loud. You got to be careful where you say this.
yeah,
You don't talk, right? And then it's kind of freaky because all of a sudden you have oppression within your own home, but it's to protect your own home. But it's hard to explain that to a kid. And just a little bit of an aside on that, because when my kids were little, same thing. I'd just be like, "Thank you, God, that I live in the country that I live in."
yeah,
Right? Tell my kids or shut them down or try and scare them into not talking out loud about what they just realized because, you could get the whole family killed. And that actually happens. So,
yes, yeah,
again, it works even with good and honest people in these repressive regimes.
yeah.
They, in order to protect their families, they have to do it gaslighting their own children. It's messed
Yeah.
up.
No, that's true. It's so sad. I can't tell you because you now touched some raw nerve and reminded me of some of the conversations I would have with my parents. Okay, and so you look up to your parents, and my mom is like very strong, very brave lady, and sometimes you broach these topics, and she'll say, "No, we don't want to say that," and and she knows like she's losing her respect in my eyes, and I'm like, no, you can't say that. And yeah, it's kind of it's tough, for parents as well. Yeah, yeah. But that's the other side of these repressive regimes that is not talked about enough, right? The toll it takes on humanity in multiple ways, not just in terms of like the physical death. It is like it's really corrupting the mind of the people, and people not being able to live their full potential. And it's just amazing, yeah, that happens. But yeah, we have
I
some.
gotta step down, Hideshi. I like hearing you speak. I liked when you spoke in the space the other day, but I gotta get going at least for a little bit here. But again, Harjeet, thanks for a great space, educational space. Good to see the people and hear the people who spoke.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming, Marshall. Thank you. I'm going to about to close now the space, but we have two speakers who come on. We'll take their points, and then we'll close the space. It's been too long, almost 3 hours now. Videshi, go ahead, man.
I just wanted to say thank you, Harjeet, for hosting this. I think this is one of the most informative spaces I have been to, and I have been trying to come up with a terminology for the violence, like what happened in the ChithiSingpora. So far, I'm thinking something. It's kind of like a scapegoat orchestration. And I'm still working on it, but I'm gonna find it. We need to find a term for it. That's what I'm working on.
No, that would be great because It's a huge trend in this type of violence, wherein you murder people, not just other religion, your own, like Air India wanted to, and this to create a fake false flag. I think I know why that happens, Videshi, and maybe this is a. I think
We
yeah.
should not forget, like, if they have to sacrifice, like, even 1 million people,
Yeah.
there are so many at disposal. You know, I know it's kind of sad thing to say, but I think that's how this ideology works.
Yeah. Let me just remove this guy, from the speaker, this sensible Sikh guy. And I don't know who runs this. Videshi, do you know who runs this handle?
No, I just follow him.
Okay. And he just put up these hundreds and thousands of these without even, having the sense. Why do you put up like these hundreds of these same tweet? Because I asked him a question already on this particular in DM. Okay, let me show you the question I asked him in the DM. Now that he has put it up. So in this tweet, what this idiot has done is, and I don't know who runs this, probably like what this guy has done is he has shown like the Air India 182 bombing and put the Ravinder Parmar's picture right in front as if like Parmar actually is claiming that he brought down that plane. Nothing more can be far from the truth. He publicly condemned that act. He never did that act. We have evidence from CC agents saying that it is the Indian state which did that act. And now this person puts up this kind of a video, basically, just spreading the Indian state propaganda. And when I asked him this question, he just goes silent. He has not responded to my DM. Let me check my DM. Have his DM come in? And you guys can see it here. Let me show you. Yeah, here is this sensible Sikh. Okay, I wrote him to the DM from the other account. Okay, I'll show you the other account, wherein I kind of asked him, like, hey, why are you doing this? When, we have nothing to do, our Shaheeds have nothing to do with this act. They have publicly condemned it. And you are here trying to make a bloody video on behalf of the Indian state. Shame on you. Go first and answer my, DM, and then you come to my space. And this is what the Indian state is been saying. And you are trying to kind of sell their propaganda. I don't know who you are, first of all. You have written your name.
It's just some tough ass, saying somewhere out there who's trying to, show up like how macho and.
What is being macho? What is in macho in saying that in he's basically slandering a Shaheed who himself said that he never did it. Who are you? Who is he to say that? They hated these acts, man. This is what Indian state did. Indian state would dress up Sikhs and go and kill innocent people and then say that the Sikhs did it. And you guys are spreading that propaganda, and you have the gumption of coming to my space and putting it up there. When I asked that question on DM to you, idiot bloody. Now let me throw him out of the space. Anyways,
we need to find out who this person is actually.
Yeah.
Because, he has been posting quite a few things that are super. Like I think the other day, he's the one who posted like a Nazi flag and then the Khalistan flag next to it, and
what the hell, man?
Yeah, and then he have like a Kurban. I'm not sure if he's the guy or that's someone else. Yeah, but he's the guy. He put the Nazi flag and the Khalistan flag.
Yeah, we should check. It must be sensible Kumar, at the end. God knows.
Yeah, I think this person is trying to equate Khalistan movement to something like a neo-Nazi, so he can create that thing in the West, maybe. Yeah,
that is what the Indians. That is what the Indians try to do all the time. So he's basically trying to amplify their propaganda. Eh? And now he didn't put one post. Okay, he has put like I don't know how many of that stupid posts that he has put up. Can somebody help me remove it on the speaker? Akal Paji, if you are there, can you help me just remove some of this nonsense he has put up there?
Yeah.
अच्छा को मैं कर ही ਦਿੱਤਾ वैसे ਹੁਣ चलो हो गया I think I cleaned it up. Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay. Anyways, we got distracted by this. But this is how the Indian state does. Like, it's not just happy with killing people. Now it wants to use that to kind of defame the whole community. Okay, and that's what their whole job is. And then they'll come up like form of these kind of accounts and pseudo names. It's amazing. But yeah, Videshi, if I would appreciate if you have like a name for this kind of a violence false flag operation that Indian state does. But with that said, yeah.
It reminds me of what's that guy's name? Balbir Singh or Purpur Singh Balbir's speech. He one time mentioned that if state of India had to completely wipe off all the Sikhs, so about 25 million people or 20 million people, to maintain, integrity and unity of India, it's still not a, they won't hesitate pretty much. Like if they want to do it. And I think he foresaw that, like that will happen. And his last interviews before he died are on YouTube. I think those can give you really good insight into the way Indian mindset works. So it wears this, in the West, like how people think, oh, India is just a very calm and spiritual nation. It has the Gandhi led the non-violent independence movement. So that's like the image of India is sold in the West. Oh, they are super sweet people. They just focus on education. They don't do, they do yoga. They do yoga. They are very spiritual. Such a nice people. And then if you actually introspect into that, all these Westerns, the good exposure they have of Indians would actually end up being usually what the Punjabis or North Indians or Sikh culture would have to offer. I personally got into those stories, like whenever I ask people, what do you love about India? They'll be like how they share food, how they have such a nice families.
Yeah.
And then when you get into it, it end up being they just had a Sikh neighbor. And then, so even our positivity kind of ends up being the image of branding of
So
India.
that's what I feel like. It is very important for Sikhs to never associate with India. Like choosing words is important. When you go to Punjab, always say I'm going to Punjab. Never say I'm going to India. Okay. When you are going to Delhi, then say I'm going to India. Okay. Teach your kids this difference. Punjab is not India. Okay.
100%.
And
It's a Desh Punjab.
and Desh Punjab. And honestly, like when I'm here, like sometimes somebody call me, oh, you're from India. I stop him there and then I say, don't offend me, okay? I'm not Indian. I'm not from India. I am from Punjab. That is my country. That is my nationality. I'm a Sikh and an American today. And that is the difference. So then so this is very important to kind of do that. To never associate our identity, we have to differentiate. Another mistake we do that's a bit more complex to solve. If you look at most of the restaurants, there's basically Punjabi food. There's no such thing called Indian food, okay? So why do we write with Indian restaurant? We just write Punjabi restaurant. Simple as that. I think people are smart enough, they'll figure out. Don't have to worry that you will lose clients. You will not lose anything. People will still come because it is Punjabi food. And the Tamilians should put up Tamilian food, The Bengali should this is an oxymoron, Indian restaurant. There's no such thing called Indian food.
Yeah, I think, a few years ago, about like 30, 40 years ago, there was a thing called Indian music. But Punjabi artists all over the world proved it. Like Punjabi music is far more superior, far more fun. It's way more engaging than your traditional whatever that Indian music you can pick it up.
No, it's not. Yeah, there is no such thing called Indian music. There is no such thing.
But what I'm saying, same thing needs to happen to the restaurants now. Like the Punjabi restaurant, like people will know, okay, that's the Punjabi food.
Yeah.
And the weird part is, Harjeet, I think it has to do with the certain branding. Like, I know so many Pakistani restaurants that actually call themselves Indian restaurants because of the the soft branding it has
Yeah.
compared to something.
Yeah, no, so they are also idiots. Like there is no such thing called Pakistani food. Guys, it is Punjabi food. That's it. Or 90% of food you are selling is Punjabi food. Or Sindhi food. Like there's Sindhi restaurant in Chandigarh, okay? So they'll call it Sindhi restaurant, which is correct. They are selling Sindhi food. And if 70% of your food is, Sindhi, then it is Sindhi restaurant. So there's no shame. Actually, it will actually help the business. Call it Punjabi restaurant, Punjabi food restaurant. Okay? And then you can say we also have dishes from Kerala or whatever, in case you have it. That really adds meaning to the work, right? Then you can really, then you are really talking about something, right? Otherwise, what is this Indian food? And then there's something called Indian dress. There's no such thing called Indian dress. ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਚੋਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਪਾਈ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਕਦੇ ਤਾਮਿਲਨਾਡੂ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ? ਪਾ ਲੋਗੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ? ਉਈਓ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਡਰੈਸ, ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਫੂਡ, ਕਿੱਥੇ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਗੁਲਾਮੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਜੰਜੀਰਾਂ ਨੇ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੰਟਰਨਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ. But the words are important, okay? So we internalize this concept that there is an Indian identity. There is no such Indian identity, okay?
See how smartly Indian government even food ਵੀ spare ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੱਡਾ, ਪੰਜਾਬੀ food ਵੀ simulate ਕਰ ਲਿਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ Indian food ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ.
ਹਾਂ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਰੈਸਟੋਰੈਂਟ ਲਿਖੋਗੇ ਨਾ, ਦੇਖੋ ਜਦੇ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਰੈਸਟੋਰੈਂਟ ਜੀ, ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨੀ. ਇੰਨੇ ਕਮੀਨੇ ਆ ਨਾ ਭਾਈ ਬੜੇ. Anyways, we are going to, I think we've been spending a lot of time. Negan aa gaya. Negan, you want to say anything before we close?
No, I just want to add one thing. I watched a video. It's like the videos from Rajasthan. I think it's like some sort of tourist place, and there's a traveler bag. So it have flags, tattoos of flags on the car, UK, Canada, and USA. So one of the Himachali guy is mad at the the driver that why do you have these flags on your bike? So it was too funny to me, as that video is from Rajasthan. Nobody have any issues, but a guy from Himachal, he do have issues. He's like, these all are Khalistani. Khalistani people have Canada as a flag or stuff on their bikes, on their cars, on their tractors.
Yeah, I think we are going to have a separate space on that, because that's a very deep issue. It looks like a very superfluous issue, but I think it's a very deep issue to talk about, like this aversion of Indians to seeing an Canadian flag, even a Canadian flag sticker in India, while at the same time when they come to Canada, they want to take the Indian flag and dance in the streets with it. And this hypocrisy which has to be called out, and we'll talk about it. But today I think we've had a long session. Just want to kind of wrap up what we started off with. We talked about the ChithiSingpora Sikh massacre, who did it. I read through the article that I had written, but we can go through it. Basically, it happened on 20th of March 2000 on Bill Clinton's visit. We talked about the UN reports, which basically highlighted that the Indian Army did it. The UN reports investigation team was headed by no less than a Lieutenant General of Indian Army and a retired Justice of the High Court, Sardar Ajit Singh Bans, which unequivocally said that that it is basically the Indian Army did it. Plus, we also had congressman from U.S. Congress kind of saying it on the floor of the U.S. House that the Indian government was behind this particular massacre. And then, in the book of Madeleine Albright, Bill Clinton himself wrote that when I went there, it was these Hindu militants who decided to murder the Sikhs. And there are New York Times articles which kind of present that evidence. And now we have, in latest stream of revelations, we have this, interview with an ex-Indian Army officer published by Mr. Gurpatwant Singh Pannu of Sikhs for Justice, wherein the army, the purported army officer claims that he was part of that group which murdered the Sikhs. They were ordered by the Indian Army to do this, and that his life is in danger now. Everybody who was involved in that, Indian government has eliminated that person, and he's in US right now under asylum. So that is the facts about this case. I encourage right-thinking people to get knowledgeable about it and understand the real nature of the Indian state, the Sanatani Hindu terrorist regime called India. And before we close, we have Videshi raising his hand up. Videshi, go ahead.
I have a call to action to everyone involved here. If you have relatives in Punjab or any other parts of it, Indian state, I think they should, in the coming elections, they should be on their agenda to ask their candidates, the people who come for their votes and whatnot, to ask about what happened in ChithiSingpora and how they are going to create a voice out of it. And they better put some pressure on their local politicians, and then maybe we can generate an official apology, and that would be, I think, a good step. Even though it's not going to do our achievement of independence, but I think we do deserve that at a minimum, and that would be a good step to get them submitted. That yes, they did it.
Did you ever went to India?
Yeah.
Do you ever? Okay, and how long have you lived over there?
About 15 years. I understand. I know where you're gonna go. But what I'm saying, brother, it's this part. Most people there on the ground, they're gonna be just ignore this part. They're gonna be like, oh, it never happened. It would be a terrorist that have done it. But what I'm saying, to talk with the people who trust you, they know they will trust your information and say or talk about it, like what happened to your brothers, or just the innocent civilians who had nothing to do with anything, and they just got killed by lining up on a point blank range. People should be talking about it. Like, how dare they kill these innocent people?
Yeah. Okay, this is a great point. I think it's the right point. We're not going to legislate on it. Good point. With I think thank you everybody for your contributions. But I think what is important is if you all can also share this. I have live streamed this through 2 accounts. The other account is not kind of restricted in India. Harjeet Social. If you can retweet that, if your account is not restricted in India, that will be super helpful, because I want information to reach to more and more people in Punjab specifically, and a broader government, broader global audience in general. So spread this message. Because in the first part, like 30 minutes, I walked through all the evidence. I think that'll be helpful for people if they ever want to know what happened in ChithiSingpora. That is the only justice we can get to the victims, so that we know who the culprits were. And rest ਆਪਾਂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਤੇ ਛੱਡਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋਣ ਲਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ। ਤੇ ਗੱਜ ਵੱਜ ਕੇ ਫਤਿਹ ਬੁਲਾਈਏ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਤੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।